So, Kep1er have disbanded. Kind of. Not really. Wait, what? Despite reports that the group would disband when their contracts ended on July 3rd, Kep1er renewed, partially. 7 members, Yujin, Jiating, Chaehyun, Daeyeon, Hikaru, Bahie, and Youngin, renewed, while Mashiro and Yeso returned to their company 143 Entertainment to re-debut in their new girl group Made In, who debuted on September 3rd. And regardless of when Kep1er fully disband, I think one thing will be true. Although the fact that they used to be part of the group will likely make the future careers of the members easier, and although they have created some great music and performances and are all talented, I think, in the end, their disbandment will be bittersweet, just as this renewal is. But the worst thing is, it's not bittersweet in the way most disbandments and renewals are. Sad that the group will be gone, but happy that they existed. No, Kep1er's disbandment will be bittersweet because, in a way, lots of people wanted them to disband. And no one, and I mean no one, is happy about Kep1er. The fans and antis alike are upset about the renewal. Fans because not everyone renewed, and antis because there was a renewal. The members seem sad that they didn't all renew, and when disbandment comes, everyone will continue to be conflicted. The fans will be sad, the members will be sad, the antis will be happy and sad at the same time, and even more so, the antis, especially the OT8s of the various members, will be angry that some of the members continue to exist in the world. But I think there is one thing that almost all of us can agree on. Whether it's because of the wrong members, solo stans, Wake1 themselves, or whatever else, I think most of us who have followed the group can agree. Kep1er have been really badly managed. Now, how big of an effect one believes the management of Kep1er had on the group being unable to reach their maximum potential depends on the kind of fan that someone is, and the beliefs that they have. Some member-oriented people would say that it has had next to no effect, and that the group was doomed from the moment certain members made it in. Some fandom-oriented people would say that the solo fandoms and fandom toxicity were the main cause. OT8s will believe it's the fault of whichever member they hate for whatever reason. But a lot of people will point to more external factors, like the state of the industry and Wake1. And as I have mentioned in many a YouTube comment and in my previous Kep1er adjacent videos, I personally am a big believer in the idea that Wake1's trashy management of the group is the biggest factor, by many, many miles. Why is this? Well, let's take a look at the other concerns people had. The lineup of the group being bad or mismanaged, certain members being bad for being in the group, solo fandoms and fandom toxicity, the state of the industry, those kinds of things. All of these issues could either be entirely mitigated or vastly improved by better management of the group, as I will hope to demonstrate in this video. And please accept my apologies in advance for occasionally lapsing into past tense to refer to the group. Not only did I initially write this script in the past tense because they were initially going to disband, but writing this script has made me even less hopeful for Kep1er's future, so I do still unintentionally think about them being in the past, kind of. So yeah, I do think that Wake1's management is responsible for the quote, downfall of Kep1er, since management could improve all other perceived issues with the group, and would have appeased almost everyone involved if they did a good job of it. What some people see as a better or worse member lineup would not have changed the bad management of the group. A less toxic fandom would not change the bad management of the group. Less solo fans would not improve the management of the group. I'd also like to clarify something about language here. A lot of people say that Kep1er either flopped or just aren't successful, and this is just a straight-up lie. We're used to success being the equivalent of groups like 17, IVE, New Jeans, BTS, and more. You know, the biggest of the big groups. But successful doesn't have to mean uber successful. Kep1er are successful. They've sold many albums, they've made lots of money, and they're generally well known of. So in this video, I won't be talking in terms of Kep1er's lack of success, I'll be talking in terms of their inability to reach their full potential. So now that I have hopefully convinced you of why management is the single biggest factor leading to Kep1er's inability to reach their full potential, let's talk about what's going to happen in this probably very long video. First, I'll give a brief overview of Kep1er's career and history so far. I'll then discuss the general trends in how Wake1 have managed them, and the storyline that Wake1 gave them. Then I'll point out some of the major issues the fans had with this management, and set out goals for my rework of their career. The bulk of the episode will be me setting out my plan for Kep1er, discussing their general concept, their storyline, and how I would adjust their pre-existing music to execute this story. I'll also discuss some general marketing techniques, like how to use the members on variety shows. A warning in advance for my bad animation that may be used to illustrate my ideas. I've only ever said that my drawing is good enough to get the point across, and I'll stick by that description. I also recorded the majority of this video quite a while ago, when I still planned to release my Girls Planet 999 videos before this one, but I ended up switching up the order, so anytime I reference Girls Planet, I'll include some written context for my statements on screen. In fact, just to prove my point, one of these references is coming up right now. After giving Kep1er a new storyline, I'll discuss the ways in which I think my plan would be objectively better for the group. And, just for fun, I'll discuss how I would apply the same plan to my ideal lineup from Girls Planet, which I introduced in my episode about the show. The importance of this section is that it shows how Wake1 and Mnet could have come up with a solid plan for a girl group in advance, which they would have been able to apply to literally anyone who got into the group from the show. Basically, there's no excuse for them to treat the group poorly just because they didn't get the lineup they wanted. So with that, let's orient ourselves and understand the base of this episode. Who even are Kep1er and what happened to them? Kep1er was a 9-member temporary project group managed primarily by Wake1 Entertainment. The group was created through Girls Planet 999, a rebrand of the series Produce 101 after a rigging scandal destroyed the series' reputation and led to the premature disbandment of Group X1. Girls Planet involved 33 girls each from Japan, China, and Korea, so 99 girls total, who battled it out for a position in the final lineup of 9 people, which was entirely chosen by fans. The final lineup was determined with a ratio of 50% Korean votes and 50% international votes, and this extreme imbalance, combined with the general oddness of the show and its lack of impact compared to Produce, led to a massive imbalance in the nationalities of the final lineup. 6 of the 9 trainees were Korean, with only 3 international trainees, or 3.5 if you count Bahie, and only 1 Chinese contestant, Xiaoting, who ranked 9th. The final lineup of the group was Rank 1 K-Group Chaehyun, Rank 2 K-Group Bahie, Rank 3 K-Group Yujin, Rank 4 K-Group Daeon, Rank 5 K-Group Youngin, Rank 6 K-Group Yeso, Rank 7 J-Group Hikaru, Rank 8 J-Group Mashiro, and Rank 9 the aforementioned C-Group Xiaoting. Now let's discuss their career with some statistics, because I love statistics. Fair warning, I neither keep up with nor fully understand sales statistics or charts, so please accept my apologies if anything here is incorrect. I've mostly just been using popular sales websites. Kep1er was supposed to debut on December 14th, 2021, but some of the members getting COVID-19 meant that the debut was pushed back, and they eventually debuted on January 3rd, 2022. They debuted with the mini-album First Impact and the title track Wadada. The mini-album did extremely well sales-wise, with over 200,000 pre-orders and 150,000 first-day sales, making it at the time the second highest first-week sales of a girl group debut album, only surpassed by aespa and beating out both IVE and Blackpink. And apparently at the time of release on January 3rd, it was the highest-selling girl group debut in Hanteo history. It eventually sold almost 400,000 copies in Korea and was certified platinum by the KMCA, or the Korean Music Content Association. The album peaked at number 1 on the KMCA chart, which is referred to as the Circle chart, or by its older name, the Gaon chart. Kep1er received their first music show win with Wadada at M Countdown on the 13th of January, and Wadada received 2 more music show wins during its promotions. Kep1er then took part in Mnet's Queendom 2, which first aired at the end of March 2022. The show was a competition between 6 girl groups to decide who was the queen of, well, Queendom. Kep1er were the newest group on the show, since they'd barely been around for 3 months, and they were joined by Brave Girls, Luna, WJSN, Viviz, and soloist Hyolyn. Kep1er, being a new group and inexperienced, were obviously way out of their depth, and although I haven't watched the show in full, the impression I've got from clips online and from fans is that the show was borderline traumatic for the members. They were, as with most Kingdom and Queendom groups, overworked, tired, and stressed. They had the need to prove themselves, but as a new group with only 2 previously debuted and experienced members, they were struggling against the formidable competition. Even more so, the high standards of performances meant that the girls beat themselves up to an immense degree, having breakdowns even over the smallest of unpreventable mistakes. That's how stressed they were. The members made many mistakes over the course of the show, and although they showed huge professionalism and created some great performances, these performances are also kind of sad to look back on, seeing how many of them were in pain, were falling over or otherwise making mistakes, and were on the verge of breakdown on stage. This was how stressed they were. Not to mention that this was a second survival show barely even 5 months after the end of the previous one they'd been on, and yeah, they had secured their debut on Girls Planet and now they had the chance to secure their fame, which no doubt would have caused extra stress. Even putting all of that aside, Girls Planet was no doubt incredibly stressful, and likely even traumatic to many of the members considering how they were treated. Being put on another survival show without even having a chance to have processed the previous one would no doubt have brought up at least subconscious stress and trauma, if nothing else. To make things worse, Kep1er's poor line distributions struck yet again, as their final song, The Girls, was so heavily lopsided in line distribution that Chaehyun sung almost half of the song, with a high note that went for something like over 20 seconds at the end. This extreme vocal strain, combined with the stress of the show and the exertion of performing, practicing, and rehearsing for their comeback, meant that Chaehyun completed the final rehearsal and was straight after rushed to the hospital, unable to complete the actual final performance, which was never fully aired. Lovely. Basically, the show did, in my opinion, next to nothing for Kep1er's fame and probably caused far more stress and injury than it was worth. Not to mention that the decision to put them on the show was hated by their fans. Their lack of released songs was a massive handicap to them, and that, in the end, they ranked 5th out of 6. So what was the point? Mnet, that's what. Kep1er's first comeback was with the mini-album Dub Last, released on June 20th, 2022, with the title track Up. Up is probably one of their most popular title tracks other than Shooting Star, and before Shooting Star came out, it was probably the most popular. Dub Last was also certified platinum by the KMCA and sold 153,000 copies on the first day, with 353,000 copies sold in Korea in total. The album also peaked at number 2 on the Circle chart. However, Up only received 1 music show win, and the album reached a peak of 24 on the Japanese Billboard chart, in comparison with First Impact, which reached a peak of 10. Kep1er then had their Japanese debut with Fly Up and Wing Wing on September 7, 2022, before releasing a Universe single, Sugar Rush, on September 23rd. They then came back with their third mini-album, Troubleshooter, on October 13, 2022, with the title track, We Fresh. The album included 4 other songs, including a remaster of their original Queendom song, The Girls, which was named after their previous performance of Girls' Generation's song, The Boys. Troubleshooter sold 167,000 first-day copies, beating both First Impact and Dub Last, and was again certified platinum by the KMCA. It also peaked at number 2 on the Circle chart. However, this is where the good kind of ends. Troubleshooter only ended up selling 267,000 copies in Korea, which is by no means bad, but it is almost 150,000 copies less than First Impact and almost 100,000 less than Dub Last. The album peaked at 21 on the Japanese album charts, only marginally better than Dub Last and far lower than First Impact, and We Fresh failed to get a single music show win. And this is where everything goes downhill for Kep1er. Most of their fans had been holding on for We Fresh, but the song was so disliked by so many fans, and the comeback was so weird compared to the others that people just left. Not to mention the mistakes the members made during the era, the abysmal line distribution, the general overworking of the group, and the toxicity of the fandom. Kep1er had a slight upturn around their first anniversary when they released their first Japanese single, I Do Do You, on February 22nd, 2023. The song was generally liked by fans. It had a better line distribution, it was cute and catchy, it subverted expectations by showing a failed love story, and it had a fun and cute music video. But unfortunately, the fun couldn't last. In yet another questionable move by Wake1, Kep1er's next album Love Struck was released on April 10th, 2023, the exact same day as monster rookie group IVE released their first studio album. It's kind of insane how bad of a move this was. IVE were hugely loved and anticipated with two ex-IZ*ONE members. They also had only ever released single albums with 2 songs each, so their first studio album was highly anticipated. Even better for IVE, they released a pre-release track, Kitsch, which increased hype for their comeback. Kep1er at the time didn't have the same strong fandom and hype that IVE did, and they didn't release a pre-release track, which meant that their album was far less anticipated in general. Even worse, Kep1er cater to a similar market to IVE, so they directly compete with each other. And for this comeback, IVE had a clear advantage. In the end, IVE got 2 wins with Kitsch, impressive since it was a B-side, and 9 wins with their title track I Am. In comparison, Kep1er got no wins with either Giddy or Back to the City, and didn't even hit 200,000 Korean sales, and Love Struck only peaked at 29 on the Japanese album charts. The album wasn't even certified platinum by the KMCA as their other Korean albums had been. Now, this isn't to say that Love Struck was a flop. Far from it. It still had good sales, peaked at 2 on the Circle chart, and both Giddy and Back to the City were very liked songs. But it was clear that Kep1er had reached their peak with their debut and they were slowly going down. Or maybe not so slowly. Kep1er released Magic Hour, their 5th Korean mini-album, on September 25th, 2023. The album was barely promoted, and when it was promoted, it was several weeks after it had actually been released, which means there was next to no hype for it. Galileo again received no music show wins, and the album peaked at 3 in Korea and dropped to peak at number 61 in Japan. A drop of more than 30 places from Love Struck's peak. The album this time didn't even break 150,000 Korean sales, and with that data, it should be no surprise to you when I say it wasn't certified platinum. Kep1er then released another Japanese single album, Fly High, with the title track Grand Prix, which was followed by a full-length Japanese album, Keep On Going, with the title track Straight Line. By this point, Wake1 had got their act together a little and had 1. Actually started using pre-release tracks to attempt to build hype. I say attempt because it didn't really work and it was done badly. And had actually given the group a full-length album with Keep On Going, even though it was a Japanese album, not a Korean one. In May and June of 2024, it was announced that 7 members of the group would be renewing their contracts for an unspecified amount of time, and Mashiro and Yeso would leave the group and return to 143 Entertainment. Kep1er wrapped up their activities as 9 in Japan a little before the release of Straight Line. They later released a full Korean album, Keep On Going on June 3rd, 2024, with 8 new songs, and had a final concert as 9 in Yokohama in July. The fact that their final concert was literally in Japan is a mark of both their popularity in Japan and how much Wake1 advertised and promoted them in Japan compared to Korea. They literally had a full Japanese album before a full Korean one. Speaking of, Keep On Going didn't even sell like 90,000 sales, I believe, so that really just shows how far they've fallen. They went from almost 400,000 to less than 100,000, and less than 100,000 isn't shabby. Like, it was something like 85,000, so it wasn't super unsuccessful, especially because that's something like 4 times the number of albums that CLC sold at their peak, but really that's just sad for a produce group. I don't even think IZ*ONE was promoted this much in Japan compared to Korea, and they were literally a Japanese collaboration group. Kep1er's actual final concert was overshadowed by the aforementioned reports that all of the members other than Mashiro and Yeso had renewed their contracts. An announcement which caused pain to everyone, since those who wanted the group to disband now wouldn't get what they wanted, and those who wanted the group to stay together also wouldn't get what they wanted since they wouldn't get their full OT9. The concert itself barely made a splash on the internet, and I feel like I heard next to nothing about it, even from Kep1er's fandoms. Pretty depressing, I feel. Kep1er's remaining 7 members then got to have a little break where they travelled and spent time with family before coming back to the internet. They had their first appearance as 7 at KCON LA on July 26, 2024, where they performed their songs Wadada, Lovely and Back to the City, an odd combination of songs in my opinion, with new line distributions which were still, unfortunately, disliked by fans. They also covered Backdoor by Stray Kids, a cover which lots of fans liked, but which was, as with every single Kep1er song, criticised for its line distribution. The main criticism of these new line distributions is that a lot of Mashiro and Yeso's lines had been allocated to Youngin, who is already a main vocalist in the group and is towards the top of almost every distribution. Meanwhile, Yujin, who is usually near the bottom of the distributions, got almost no new lines, leaving her far behind. Bahie and Hikaru were 2 members who fans also wanted to have more lines, but since Bahie got a decent number of new lines, and Hikaru often has decent lines or at least standout parts, I don't think they were done nearly as dirty as Yujin. Xiaoting is another person who didn't get a lot of new lines, but she also usually starts in the centre of songs, so you could argue that that's an excuse, at least she stands out. This obviously isn't to say that Youngin didn't deserve the new lines she got. She deserves all of them. But Yujin also deserved lines and hasn't had nearly as much of a chance to shine as many of the other members. Made In are set to debut on September 3rd, an odd date that is after this script has been recorded but before the video will be released, so I'll add any extra thoughts I have on Maiden's actual debut here on the screen. I'm very skeptical about this group. It's made up of Mashiro and Yeso, Produce Japan contestants, and Limelight members. Limelight have never been super popular, Produce Japan isn't spoken of a lot in K-pop, and I don't know that Kep1er have had the success that Mashiro and Yeso need to be able to make the group successful. But clearly 143 thought they could get more money out of Mashiro and Yeso by getting all of the profits, so let's see how we go. At time of recording this script, there hasn't been any announcement about a new Kep1er album, more activities outside of KCON, or even how long the remaining members actually renewed for. The upcoming debut of ISNA will no doubt cause issues for Kep1er, as Wakwon will have to choose which group is more worthwhile for them, and I think that group will get all of the attention. And that favoured group is probably not going to be Kep1er. So that was Kep1er's career. In my opinion, extremely sad. Yes, many produce groups have anticipated debuts, which means they're more likely to get the highest album sales at debut than other groups, who are more likely to have a peak in the middle or towards the end of their careers. But the downward trend of Kep1er's album sales is one that builds a sense of dread in me, and possibly did so for the members as well, especially Yujin, who got to have the sad privilege of having 2 groups with great potential never reach their fullest ability. So what was Kep1er's marketing strategy? Well, genuinely, I'm not sure. It seems to be all over the place. There wasn't really a specific mood or concept they executed, and although Girls Planet had a space theme, this only vaguely continued throughout Kep1er's comebacks. It was kind of seen in Wadada and received about 10 seconds of screen time in Up. Other than that, we got Galileo, a little bit in Shooting Star, and that was it for the space theme. Later in their career with Grand Prix, and possibly with its origins in We Fresh, they had a racing or gaming theme, which portrayed them as cool superheroes. But that wasn't connected to the space theme at all and was met with plagiarism accusations from some ITZY fans. Wake One didn't seem to have a strategy with which members they sent to variety shows and other programs, and Kep1er overall seemed to have a small number of appearances compared to other groups. Although this could just be me not seeing any of their content in my feed because, again, no one seems to actually care about this group. The line distributions for songs were, and still are to a lesser extent, nonsensical, where some songs were even and some weren't for seemingly no reason. And the same can be said for screen time and center time in songs. They didn't treat Chaehyun as a center most of the time in promotional materials, but she had the biggest line share in songs, to the point of falling ill on Queendom. Xiaoting, who many fans wanted as center, was only sporadically treated like one, and was in general treated very weirdly, as many Chinese idols are. Bahie, Mashiro, Yujin, and Xiaoting were often given scraps of lines in songs, and Hikaru was given fewer lines than many of the other members, including her rap counterpart Dion, meaning that when looking at their career songs, the 3 international members have the lowest line distributions, second only to Bahie, which, well, could be a coincidence, but could also very well be racism. Weirdly also, Hikaru, a Japanese member, was given very few Japanese lines in a Japanese song, I Do Do You. More weirdness for the Kep1er pile of weirdness. Kep1er consistently released albums around the time that other popular groups like IVE did, and never made use of the great marketing strategy that is using pre-releases. Even worse, the one time they didn't do it properly. For instance, their full-length Japanese album, Keep On Going. They released the pre-release title track Straight Line with a music video, but when the actual album released a week or so later, there was literally nothing. No new music video, no special performance, just a several days late comeback showcase / live, and looking back at their YouTube channel, I'm not even sure they had that, I might have just hallucinated it. And the full album just released on Spotify with no fanfare. I completely forgot the album was releasing, and I had to set myself a reminder to go and look at it. That's how forgettable it was. There was zero hype online that I saw, and I didn't even see Kep1er's accounts post any reminders on platforms like Instagram and YouTube. Juxtapose this with albums like IVE's IVE, where both Kitsch and IM received massive hype, and with IVE's Baddie, where Off the Record set a unique tone for the album and people got interested in what would come next. IVE really are the masters of pre-release tracks. So now let's take a quick moment to consider their actual storyline. Because yes, believe it or not, Kep1er do kind of have an actual storyline. Most people don't think Kep1er has a storyline. Which is fair, you know. Kep1er's concepts between albums were just way too wild and varied, and there wasn't any real connection that people could see other than, well, the name of the group and the fact that all of the members were the same. I mean, Wadada was an upbeat dance song where the members teleported around between planets, and seemingly had electricity powers. It was a nice start to the storyline with them making contact with each other. They even had the makings of an amazing storyline calling card, the motif of the 2 suns in the sky. One which represents Kep1er's dreams and one which represents the love of their fans, Kep1erians. The choreography to Wadada may seem cringy, but the hand motions they make in the chorus and the circles that are throughout it are literally just representations of the 2 suns. Genuinely, learning this fact made me instantly warm up to the Wadada choreography, which I had literally hated for 2+ years. The 2 suns are a great and relatively unique idea. It was a great idea which I wanted to see more of, so here's a few snippets from their choreography video showing the motif of the 2 suns throughout it. Because, interestingly, it's kind of hard to see if you don't actually know they have a storyline. But then they went on Queendom and had a racing concept for their new version of Wadada. Okay, fine, I guess teleportation is also going fast, like racing, and they're using flags to send a signal like they did in Wadada. They also had the Two Suns feature at the start, but that was about it. But then we get to Pool Party, which, yes, is a cover song, and yes, is a cover of a more upbeat song at that. But the random switch from racing to Alice in Wonderland was odd and unexpected, and it's not like songs can't change genres when covered. ATEEZ are the perfect example when they made brighter songs turn into horror songs with Rhythm Tar and Black Cat Nero. Kep1er was in no way required to keep the happy summer nature of Rolling. They could have turned it into a darker concept where Alice falls into a dangerous version of Wonderland and is surrounded by witches and supernatural entities. And this would have been a far better idea when considering that their next performance, The Boys, had a gothic witch sort of concept, which gave them both a good vibe with white wings and a bad vibe where they all wore hooded cloaks and the backup dancers collapsed around them and worshipped them. So far we have 3 very different concepts. You would think whichever portion of, I assume, Wake One's production or creative team would have the common sense to give them a decently cohesive image, as you know, most artists tend to create on Kingdom and Queendom. But no, their original song, The Girls, was some generic kind of girl crush, oh, I'm so much more badass and cool than you song. Now again, I haven't watched the whole show, but other groups have created amazing performance series on Kingdom and Queendom, using the opportunity to either add to their existing stories or create a mini storyline. For instance, Idol had a consistently darker in colour, cool and awesome concept, which of course culminated in them becoming queens in Lion. ATEEZ used Kingdom to add to their storyline, bringing in the Kraken and introducing their new universe, Universe Z. Stray Kids used Kingdom to create a mini storyline where they were kind of ambiguously maybe werewolves, I guess, and The Boys created a Game of Thrones-esque universe. Although the stories created by The Boys, Stray Kids and Idol didn't continue past the shows they were on, they did create a lasting impact for the audience, and they were great works of art. And then here comes Kep1er, who force out 4 performances of very varying quality and concept. I'm baffled. Who planned these performances? The members tried, they really did, but they just didn't have the foundation they needed. Anyway, after Queendom, we've generally had Kep1er with more confident concepts, or more enthusiastic ones like Wadada. So what do we get? Something literally no one expected. A bright, innocent summer concept with rainbows and bright colours in the background and stage outfits dominated by white, blue and yellow, not purple and black. Needless to say, as fun as Up was, Kep1er had done literally nothing to cement their identity in the industry. Up kind of continued the story from Wadada, I guess, maybe? The girls were exploring a new world, which presumably is our world. Now that they have connected and come down from space to be with Kep1er, they get to explore the world. There were also suggestions of their dreams, the same as in Wadada, and the song included a segment where the members featured as pseudo-space goddesses, but that was about it. Wing Wing contributed literally nothing to the story, Sugar Rush only vaguely focused on dreams, and instead of adding to it, We Fresh took a completely different route with a heroes and villains concept, showing Kep1er training as superheroes. By I Do Do You and Giddy, it was clear that Kep1er had no storyline really. They had started with the hints of one and a decent beginning, and then for whatever reason, whether it be the lack of people talking about it, a lack of effort and passion, or whatever else, Wake One just canned it after Queendom. Other relations were just circumstantial. I Do Do You, Giddy, Galileo, Grand Prix and Straight Line all have their own stories and concepts, and this is the same even for Shooting Star. And they're all fine on their own, but none of them are properly related to each other, or to the original story, or even to Kep1er as a group. They're just generic girl group concepts. And this is so depressing. The hints of storyline in Wadada were so vague and unrealised that very few people even realised they were there. And since no other song followed it, everyone just assumes Kep1er don't have a storyline. But they did. They did, and I need people to know that. It had so much potential, just as the group themselves did, and that potential was so massively squandered by Wake One. It makes me want to cry from rage and sadness. The only even vaguely good return to storyline that Kep1er had was their second Korean fan meeting, Kep1er's Strange Market, which was held in October of 2023. The fan meet featured this cute little VCR where Kep1er ran, well, a strange market, which fulfills strange orders for fans, giving them whatever they want. The whole thing is, well, perfectly strange and quirky, and at the end, the girls get to relive their past memories in the worlds of their past albums, kind of like the memories are collected to keep them and their fans going. It's a really good VCR, completed very well by Bahir's unique voice as the narrator, and it's so sad because it really shows how good their story could have been. But I'll get to that later. Kep1er also returned somewhat to their space concept with Shooting Star, but this story seemed unrelated to what they had before, or at least I don't think Wakwon made any effort to make it similar to what they had before. It was just a space concept seemingly because Wakwon remembered all of a sudden that their group was actually supposed to be, a group with a space concept. They didn't have any of the previous motifs in the story like teleportation, the aurora, the electricity powers, or the two suns. To demonstrate both the brilliance and sadness of Kep1er's storyline, let me tell you the story of someone who is possibly one of their most dedicated fans, Chromoshin. Chromoshin is a Redditor who is interested in storylines and theories for many groups, including Luna, NMIXX, and of course, Kep1er. He is the only consistent Kep1er lore theorist who I've seen on the internet, so let's just say Kep1er theorists are a critically endangered species. He has posted theory posts for every Korean Kep1er comeback and Japanese comeback, including performances like Queendom and singles like Sugar Rush, from Wadada to Galileo, where I think he finally gave up. The story of Chromoshin is a very sad one, because although he was so passionate about Kep1er's storyline at the beginning, in the end he couldn't even pretend that Wakwon gave two shits about the storyline anymore. His posts go from confident to desperately trying to connect ideas between music videos to an overarching storyline, to eventually just giving up and giving us general media analysis anyway. It was pretty depressing to see. But that said, he did have some really interesting ideas. His posts are proof that, yes, although it was barely visible, Kep1er did have a story of some sort for like 1.5 albums. Chromoshin's interpretation of Kep1er's storyline is based around the concept of 3 universes, represented by the 2 suns and a third smaller dot that's shown between them in Wadada. These universes are called C0, C1, and C-. The girls have to communicate between them to reach their alter egos. Where is the evidence in the music video that there are 3 parallel universes, you may ask? Well, there are 3 outfits the members wear in the music videos, and 3 colours of electricity which are around and between them in these different outfits. Chromoshin also points to how Kep1er's pre-debut connection film shows different versions of the group, and the white corridor between them which houses a portal in Wadada, and which in the connection film leads them to their alter egos. This evidence is... it's a nice idea, but I don't think there's any real evidence for this. The electricity colours are the colours of the 3 planets on Girls' Planet, pink, blue, and yellow for Korea, Japan, and China, so it makes sense to use them since the girls are coming together here. The connection film I don't think has any suggestion that the corridor is a portal. To me, it reads as more of a connecting to our past and future selves thing. The 3 outfits in the music video don't mean anything in my opinion. Almost every single K-pop music video for any group who has even a bit of a budget has 3 sets of outfits. We would need something more explicit to imply the presence of multiple universes, like how Hala T's and AT's face each other down in Say My Name. But there's none of that in Wadada. Chromoshin suggests that the presence of portals and jumping between the planets shows this, but I don't think this corridor reads as a portal at all, and nothing else suggests it is. And the jumping between the planets, although plausible, just, again, in my opinion, doesn't read that way. We would need to see them changing planets to do this, like the members going from one planet to another, and this just doesn't happen. And I genuinely just think the planet thing was Wakwon going, oh look, we have cool transitions. Look, we used the space concept you all wanted. You can't complain now, we put money into our CGI. I don't think it's actually communicating anything other than the concept of the onomatopoeia wadada, or running quickly and moving quickly by any means to be close to Keplian. But Chromation's post is well put together and I do recommend checking it out. I'll link it in my reference document in the description. Basically, alter egos as an idea would be really cool, but if that's what Wake 1 intended, it was so incredibly poorly executed that almost no one knew it was even there. This concept is the basis of Chromation's theories, and his theories for Up and We Fresh are pretty much just discussing general themes and trying to fit them into this concept. He also did some snazzy analysis on the Queendom stages, putting, I think, far more effort into his analysis than Wake 1 did into the actual performances. I also really recommend taking a read of his Galileo post, which gave a lot of fun, interesting history facts and trivia which served as the basis for the music video. I learned a bunch about Galileo and Kepler and really enjoyed reading that one in particular. And that post has influenced my own version of Kepler's storyline, which I'll discuss later. I reached out to Chromachin for this video and he was happy for me to talk about his stuff, and gave a bit of insight into his thoughts. Kep1er did have a bit of a story in Grand Prix where they kind of became video game racer superheroes, and this was shown well in Mama, but that was kind of it. It wasn't a story that was continued into their next release straight line, and even if it had been, it would have been far too little too late. Then in Shooting Star, they did have a return to a space concept, but it had nothing to do with their space concept in Wadada, and it was more to do with the members like coming to terms with their inner selves and uniting with their secret superpowers or something. It was not related, let's just say that. So with that somewhat depressing overview of the storyline that Wake 1 did actually give, or not really give, Kep1er, let's have a quick rundown of the issues that their fans, and their sales had with Wake 1's management of the group, and thus to set goals for my re-management of the group. Obviously, I don't know every complaint that has ever been made about the group or Wake 1, but I do know the majority of concerns. So let me present them to you as a quick list of issues people had with Kep1er and their management. This is just a quick list. I'll discuss evidence for each claim and attempt to solve them in the next segment. The goal of this episode will be to solve as many of these issues as possible. First, many people were upset with both the group and fandom name, so we'll have a look at changing them. Many fans are also concerned with how the toxic fandom was treated, or more like ignored, by the company. So we'll aim to address them. Fans are also concerned with the misallocation of group positions, such as Chaehyun technically being the centre of the group but not treated like one. We'll aim to better allocate positions and to treat Chaehyun like the centre she is. Next, we have a lesser concern but one that exists either way. Kep1er seemed to have gone on a very small number of reality shows, or at least haven't gone viral on them, and by mismanaging the members who go, Wake 1 may or may not have reduced the amount of exposure the group could get. Following on, we have the misuse of the group in general, which likely reduced sales. For instance, many fans of Bahie, Xiaoting and Chaehyun have been apprehensive about buying albums, considering the treatment of their biases. We'll take a look at this. Speaking of treatment of biases, Kep1er's line distribution is terrible, so we'll have a look at that too. Next is a personal concern of mine, that Kep1er didn't have a single Korean or world tour, only Japanese ones. Considering their huge popularity internationally, I'd aim to get them some more activities like this. Next, we have the lack of a group identity. Many of Kep1er's comebacks were vastly different from each other, and they didn't have anything that made them uniquely Kep1er. My rewrite of their storyline will be the main way I attempt to tackle this. Speaking of the storyline, let's mention how they seem to have had very little time, money, love, and creativity put into them compared to Zero Base One and other groups. Next, Wake 1's terrible choices in album release dates, and their terrible choices in title tracks, which often left fans upset and wishing for what could have been. And finally, something that would probably fix a good chunk of these things: The lack of a storyline, which would have given Kep1er an identity, would have held them together, drawn fans in, and would have given them a lasting artistic impact on the industry, the same way 101 and IZ*ONE did. There's one thing that will lay the foundation to fix all of these issues. As I said, it would tie them together, it would help them stand out and would bring in more fans, rather than just slowly losing all the fans they had from Girls Planet. We need to give Kep1er a story. In this section, I'll lay out all of my plans for how Kep1er could be managed better, in detail, from the moment Girls Planet finished to the moment they disband. I'll consider all of the points I laid out above and give reasons why I think my solution would be, well, probably not the best solution because no one's perfect, but a good solution nonetheless. And that's exactly it. This is all my opinion. And yes, I have thought a lot about this, and I do have evidence as to why these would be good solutions. But at the end of the day, they're the plan of only one fan, a filmmaker fan to be sure, but I'm a filmmaker and a scriptwriter, not a K-pop producer. So before we get into the bulk of their storyline, let's discuss the basic things, aka address the points from my previous section. And I'll give you a little spoiler. The saddest thing about writing this episode was how it made me see just how close Kep1er were to perfection. Almost reaching your potential is worse than missing it by a country mile, in my opinion. And all Kep1er needed were a few little tweaks. Let's start with the group name and fandom name. Many people were upset with Kep1er. They didn't think it was a nice name, they were upset that they didn't get a prettier name like Cosmics, and some people voiced vocal concerns that the group was named after an old white guy from centuries ago. Similarly, they didn't like the fandom name Keplians, which many thought was cringy and lacking creativity. I thought pretty hard about changing Kep1er's name. I mean, Cosmics is and always will be the best option for the group, in my opinion. It's so perfect. But there was one thing that convinced me to keep the name Kep1er, other than the obvious fact that it's grown on all of us. And that was because of the abbreviation of it that they use in their songs, Kep1. Kep1 is a cute little calling card, and more so, it has been used to pretty good effect in their songs. Kep1 moving, Kep1 going, Kep1 dreaming, etc. When sung, especially with the way it's pronounced in many of their songs, Kep1 sounds like keep on, allowing the group to tell their fans to keep on going and other fun, encouraging phrases. Since their sweet and genuine image has been one of the elements of Kep1er that I think has been the best received, I want to capitalize on the ability to use this vocal calling card in different ways. So, as much as it pains me to leave Cosmics behind, and as much as it is an honourable mention, I've decided to keep Kep1er's name the same. Not the fandom name though. Keplian is fine in that it expresses that the fans are part of the Kep1er planet, but I think a more creative option can be found. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I do really like Everglowup's option of Lyra. I also really like Stars or something like that, but Stars was a pre-existing fandom name. In the end, I decided on Solar, stylized with a 1 instead of an L. Solars is a fandom name that would roll off the tongue, and it's a word that has an L in it which can be changed to a 1 to represent the group and the fandom becoming one. It's also a celestial name which fits a group with a space concept. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, Kep1er's original storyline was two suns which represented the dreams of the group and the fandom. Solar as a fandom name shows how the fans are the sun, as in the storyline they are literally Kep1er's sun. The solar system also revolves around the sun, so, well, the implications of a group revolving around their fans is obvious. The sun also brings light into the world, and with light comes colour, something that Kep1er's storyline said they aimed to bring into the world. So, I hope you like it, Solars. Speaking of, I want to change their intro phrase. In my opinion, catch your eye, catch your mind is fine, but it's always come off as too long and cringy to me. It just sounds a bit weird in practice. It also sounds like something Eyes1 would say, not Kep1er. I mean, Eyes1's catchphrase was literally eyes on me. It's too close. It's like they're wishing for Eyes1 to come back. In light of our new fandom name, I would propose either Catch the Sun or Be My Sun. Catch the sun because the second sun is Kep1er's dreams, so if they catch the sun, they achieve their dreams. Be My Sun because, well, the fans are their other sun. Both of these catchphrases, but especially Be My Sun, would give the group an identity separate from Eyes1 and other produce groups, and would directly relate to the storyline. They make enough sense that they work well, but they would also encourage more people to check the group out and find out why they have a sun concept. Be My Sun is also good because, similar to Catch Your Eye, Catch Your Mind, it encourages non-fans to check out the group, and to become suns or solars too. Moving on, many people were concerned with how the toxic portion of Kep1er were handled. There are solo stands running around left and right, even more so than for other produce groups. There are OT8s for almost every member, and some, like those who anti-Dion and Bahie, have congregated into communities. The fandom also has general toxicity based on things like line distributions, center time, and positions, which led to lots and lots of arguing online. I mean, if it's bad enough that I can make over 9 hours of videos just about anti-Bahie OT8s and still only just scrape the surface, you know something's gone wrong. So how will we fix it? I mean, we're pretending we're Wake1 here, and Wake1 can't very well go around smiting down every single OT8 account to ever exist. They also can't very well tell the fans to fuck off because, well, this is a K-pop group and they need to pander to the fans as much as possible. But this doesn't mean there's nothing we, or they, could do. We just need to have some foresight and some common sense. Said foresight will have alarm bells going off in our heads as soon as Girls Planet ends, or even sooner. We know from the online discussions about the show and during the show that we, like a smart company, have monitored that the fans won't be happy for many reasons. Let me introduce you for the nth time to the 5 main issues people had with Kep1er, which seem to have become a big topic of discussion on my channel now. First, the lack of Chinese trainees. Second, the lack of global trainees in general. Third, Zhao Ting suddenly dropping to rank 9. Fourth, Dion making the group. And fifth, Bahie making the group and ranking so high. For the purpose of this video, I'll add a not Kep1er specific 6th issue. Urina didn't make it in. There's not much we can do about these issues. The votes have been cast and we have our group. But we can realise that Dion and Bahie are very divisive figures, and that the fans were, in general, disappointed with the group. And we can do something to try and quell the fans' rage with this lineup, even though we ourselves dislike it, because I think it's pretty clear that Mnet/Wake1 did dislike the final lineup. I propose, first and obviously, not marketing this group as a global girl group, because it just isn't. That would be a good first step. The second step would be putting out a statement. I won't write the specifics of said statement because I know pretty little about PR, but this statement should, in order, 1. Thank the fans profusely for their support over the course of Girls Planet 999. 2. Explicitly state that all of the members of Kep1er worked hard to get where they are and belong to the group. By vocally accepting all of the members as equal members of the group, Wake1 can validate them, and subconsciously antis will have less to complain about, since, well, they can't argue that someone doesn't belong in the group. It would seem a little bit silly to say so if the company literally emphasized otherwise. Third, this statement will explicitly say that any accounts sending malicious comments against any of the members or the group as a whole will be met with legal action. And then, Wake1 has to actually back that up. You can't just say it. Finally, the statement will reiterate the presence of the 9 Kep1er members, who have now become one as a group, and will ask the fans to support the dreams of the group and all of the eliminated trainees in the future. Once this is done, as I said, Wake1 need to follow up on their word to take down malicious commenters. As I said, they can't get rid of every single one, but they can get rid of the large and thus vocal ones, and they can get rid of communities and group chats that surface. It is absolutely unacceptable from a company and a fan standpoint that a group like the Kep1er OT8 subreddit was allowed to exist for so long, and that large anti-Dion and anti-Bahie groups and accounts have been able to run around for so long in multiple languages. You may say, but isn't bad publicity still publicity? And yes, it is, but these OT8 groups haven't gained huge amounts of publicity. They've had less of an outrage effect and more of a quiet effect. By allowing these groups and accounts to continue to exist, Wake1 says that they don't care that many of the members continue to receive terrible hate and have defamatory comments made against them. And as these groups continue to exist, more people think it's okay to make bad comments about the members, which leads to them making those bad comments and starting arguments in places like YouTube comment sections. And, lo and behold, the toxicity of your fandom has just risen. These events aren't dramatic enough to attract publicity and fans, but they are dramatic enough to discourage people from becoming fans, or to cause other people like me to purposefully distance themselves from the fandom. There's a reason I say I'm not a Kep1er even though I really love the group. And that is why, from a company standpoint, these groups are bad. From a human standpoint, we obviously don't want the members to be sent hate, but companies don't care about the human standpoint. What they do care about is how these poor fandom attitudes could make more people leave the fandom than join it, which in the case of Kep1er, they definitely did. As soon as Wake1 realizes this, and it should be right away since they should have the foresight to realize what a divisive lineup this is, they should be cracking down on toxic fandom activity as much as they reasonably can as a company. If they show they don't condone hate and toxicity, the antis will have less ways to put that out into the world. And the less ways they have to do that, the less people will be exposed to massive arguments, and the less the fans in general will condone toxicity. These actions, backed up by the statement we made after Kep1er's formation, and backed up further by good management of the group, should help stem fandom toxicity. At least a little bit. Hopefully. It's better than nothing. Moving on to more management things, let's talk positions. Kep1er don't have official positions outside of Yujin as the leader, Mashiro as co-leader, and Yeso as the maknae. Dispatch has claimed that Wake1 named Chaehyun as the main vocalist, Dion as the main dancer, and Xiaoting as lead dancer, but I haven't really seen this discussed anywhere, and they're a very odd set of positions to confirm. Since these apparently came from an interview, I think they must have been implied rather than named. Maybe. Since their debut, their K profiles have been filled in with many positions, but the sources for some of them are very sketchy, such as Dion saying, "I'm Kep1er's main dancer," on a live. Like, yeah, she could be telling the truth and being literal, but there's a billion examples of K-pop idols labeling themselves as positions they don't actually have, just to seem confident or as a joke. Like Hongjung saying he's good at all positions, or the subtitles labeling Mingi as a main vocalist when he's trying to hit a high note. This live doesn't reflect official positions, it reflects Dion's confidence in her dancing skills. The K-Profile site also labels all members as vocalists. Their evidence? The fact that every member of the group has done a song cover on Kep1er's YouTube channel. Yeah, I kid you not. And while yes, this shows that they can all sing, like the Dion live, it doesn't mean anything for their actual positions in the group. The website also says that it doesn't take into consideration, quote, unreliable sources like Dispatch, but Dispatch are the only ones who are reported to have actually spoken to Wake1 about positions. So, needless to say that outside of our leader, co-leader, and maknae, we don't really have proper positions. At this point, you may be fuming at me through the screen. Casper, you say, you've forgotten about Chaehyun being the literal center of the group. Was that what you were thinking? I hope so. I hope you didn't forget about Chaehyun. You see, Chaehyun came first on Girls' Planet. By all the rules of produce, she should be the group's center. But there's one problem with that sentence. As much as I and many others act like it is, and in many ways it really is, Girls' Planet just isn't produce. It was very specifically not marketed as a season of produce, and very specifically and purposefully took drastic steps to distance itself from produce. I've watched all of Girls' Planet, as you know from my Girls' Planet videos, and as much as they glorified the nature of being rank 1, as they always do on these shows, they never, as far as I remember, said that the final rank 1 would become the center of the group. They never even said this on Boys' Planet as far as I can remember, but of course, Mnet were happy with Junghao as center. See, Girls' Planet, as far as we know, wasn't rigged, which means that the producers can't decide on a concept and then rig a center who they know would suit that concept. Hence, there's a bit of disconnect between Chaehyun being center versus the center they wanted, who, let's be real, is probably Dion. So, Chaehyun isn't really Kep1er's center, either in name or in practice, since she isn't treated like one. The fact that Chaehyun isn't treated like a center, and that the positions of other members are kind of up for debate, means that there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of debate online about the positions of Kep1er members, about who's a better vocalist or a dancer than whom, and so on and so on. And these debates do, yes, exist for all groups, but it's so disproportionate for Kep1er that it's kind of insane. I see two main ways to reduce this. First, with the anti-toxicity statement I described earlier, and second, by giving the members official positions. It's been a trend in K-pop to not have official positions, a trend that may or may not have been popularized with TXT. But the thing is, only certain groups can pull this off. They need to be a group where every member can do almost everything, and with a concept that facilitates this. It works for TXT since they rarely have rap sections in their songs, and since all of the members can sing and dance well. But it doesn't work for a group like Kep1er, who have skill discrepancies between members, members who have specialized in one thing only, and of course, massive and toxic solo fan bases. Hence, they need positions. Main and lead are words with overlapping meaning in K-pop, and they're kind of obfuscated, so I'll stick with main for, well, the singular main person or small group in charge of that position. Then we'll use a regular rapper, dancer, vocalist for others, and a sub-position for those who only occasionally dabble in that position. Let's start at the top. As much as I like Yoojin and think she's done a great job, I feel that having Mashiro as only a co-leader is both a discredit to her leadership skills and potentially racially motivated. I thought about making Mashiro the sole leader of Kep1er, but I couldn't justify removing Yoojin from that position. So Yoojin and Mashiro will become co-leaders, not one above the other. Now for center. As I said, Girls' Planet didn't promise a center position to Chaehyun, but it was generally accepted by fans that rank 1 should be center anyway, and I don't see any real reason to move away from rank 1 as center, especially since it came back in Boys' Planet, not in name but in practice. However, Girls' Planet was different from Produce, and although Chaehyun can shine as a center, there are others in the group who would arguably do better. So, to reflect the unique premise of Girls' Planet and the global nature of the show, I decided to have 3 rotating centers of Kep1er, one for each planet on Girls' Planet 999. Zhaoting becomes the Chinese center by default, but I think she would have deserved it no matter which other Chinese trainees made the group. Between Mashiro and Hikaru, as much as I love Mashiro, I think Hikaru has more of what people want in a center, so she will be our Japanese center, and Chaehyun is our Korean center as she ranked first. This also nicely reflects K1, C1, and J1 as centers of the show, and it also nicely reflects a main dancer, a main rapper, and a main vocalist. Now, I want to be straight up here. 2 of these people are our original Girls Planet centers. So what about Dion? Genuinely, I don't think Dion is center material. I personally find her stage presence lacking, and although her dancing is great and her enthusiasm is through the roof, I think she often tries too hard to be cool when she doesn't need to. She also doesn't have the versatility of performance that I think a center should have, and I think Xiaoting and Hikaru have. If I were to pick a non-Chaehyun Korean center, I would give the position to Youngeun, who has a lovely voice, great dance skills, and is a very versatile performer, as well as having a great variety personality. So, honourable mention to Youngeun, but our 3 centers are Chaehyun, Hikaru, and Xiaoting, with Chaehyun being treated as the overall group center. Take the next segment with a grain of salt, since, well, I don't know much about the professional aspects of dancing, singing, and rapping. But looking at Kep1er's career and the many debates I've seen about them online, I'm going to allocate positions as follows. Dance. Dion, Hikaru, Xiaoting, and Youngeun are main dancers. Everyone else are regular dancers. Controversial opinion maybe, but I don't think Kep1er have any particularly weak dancers. Everyone can keep up, or better than keep up, and that's pretty good with such a strong main dance line. Vocals. Chaehyun, Youngeun, and maybe Yoojin as main vocalists. This may be controversial, but I think Yoojin has shown her ability to pull off a main vocal position on Girls Planet, and if nothing else, she definitely has the determination to improve herself to that point. Yeso, Bahie, Mashiro, and Xiaoting will be regular vocalists, while Hikaru and Dion will be sub-vocalists. Why will become apparent in the next sentence. Rap. Dion and Hikaru will be the main rappers, and Bahie, Mashiro, and Youngeun will be sub-rappers. Bahie and Mashiro have both been given rap parts in Kep1er songs, and Youngeun has given hints of rap skill on Girls Planet. Dion and Hikaru, since they are both main dancers and rappers, will be sub-vocalists, despite being, obviously, both able to sing. I'm not a fan of the visual position, but Korea likes it. I get the impression that Xiaoting is the clear standout in Korea, so obviously she's in. I see Yeso mentioned most commonly as a secondary visual, so I'll add her too, especially since she didn't end up with many positions otherwise. No, positions aren't a charity, but especially with such a volatile fandom, it needs to be at least a little bit balanced. Balanced within reason, I'll say. Finally, face of the group. Many a person has said this already, but I think it should be Bahie. She ranked second on the show, and along with Xiaoting and Yoojin, is probably the most well-known outside of the fandom. I've seen many a person say they only know who she is, and maybe either Yoojin or Xiaoting. Bahie has decent vocal and dance skills, and although not a proper rapper, has done a good job with what she's been given. She's got a good variety show personality, has shown herself to be sincere and kind, likes baking, which is always a goer on variety shows, is friends with lots of people in the industry, and has a unique face and vocal tone. She's got a good variety show personality, has shown herself to be sincere and kind, likes baking, which is always a goer on variety shows, is friends with lots of people in the industry. Bahie being the face of the group would 1. Mean that the face of the group is easily recognizable, which is important. 2. Give a good impression of the rest of the group. 3. Allow her variety personality to be shown off. 4. Allow lots of collaborations with other groups. 5. Take advantage of her pre-existing fandom. And 6. Both satiate her fandom by making them feel she is well used, and dissuade her antis, since, well, they can't argue she doesn't belong in the group if she's the literal face of it. So that means that these are our positions. Chaehyun is the center, main vocalist and dancer. Bahie is a dancer, vocalist, face of the group and sub-rapper. Yoojin is a co-leader, dancer and main vocalist. Daeon is a main dancer, main rapper and sub-vocalist. Youngin is a main dancer, main vocalist and sub-rapper. Yeso is a visual, dancer, vocalist and the maknae. Hikaru is the Japanese center, main dancer, main rapper and sub-vocalist. Mashiro is a co-leader, dancer, vocalist and sub-rapper. And Xiaoting is a visual, Chinese center, main dancer and vocalist. That looks pretty good to me. It's even and it's decently reasoned. The line distribution should reflect these changes. Chaehyun, Youngin and Yoojin will get the highest vocal lines, while Daeon and Hikaru will get the most rap lines. But although it's definitely easier said than done, it is essential that the line distributions are as even as possible. No more scraps and being treated as extras for people like Bahie, Mashiro, Xiaoting and Yoojin, and no more overworking people like Daeon and Chaehyun. Wake 1 should have the foresight, based on what I said above, to know that this is a very volatile fandom, and volatile fandoms need to be treated carefully. Line distributions are a big source of pain within fandoms, so we'll need to keep them as even as possible, and do our best to switch who the 7th to 9th members are in the distributions each time, or else give them killing parts. If even AI can do it properly, you can do it too, Wake 1. This obviously also goes for distributions of dance breaks, music video screen time, center time, etc. The main dancers will have the most dance breaks, but other members can be sprinkled in evenly. The 3 centers and Chaehyun most of all should have the most center time in dances and music video screen time. But that doesn't mean we just cut off the other members altogether. Again, for variety shows, Bahie goes the most, but when she doesn't go alone, we should get the leaders, Chaehyun our main center, and a distribution of others depending on who gets viral moments and so on. I personally think that Youngin Bahie would be a great variety show duo, although I think that Youngin, Bahie, Daeon and Hikaru are the standout variety personalities in this group, with an honourable mention for Yoojin. Kep1er have been used really poorly on variety shows, and with their personalities, their own show should really be more popular than it is. They get abysmal views compared to many other groups. I hope that sending them to more shows and sending the right variety of members would bring them more funny viral moments, views, fans, and so on. Finally, their promos and V-Lives. Right now in promo images, many a time Chaehyun, Bahie and Xiaoting are at the back or sides. In our version of Kep1er, our main center Chaehyun and face of the group Bahie ranks 1 and 2 will be front and center as much as possible, and our visuals Xiaoting and Yeso will be next to them. This also applies to V-Lives. We'll try and have our other center Hikaru near the center too, and then switch other member positions where we can. This is obviously far from the worst thing Wake 1 has done, but, well, Wonyoung was in the center for almost everything IZ*ONE did. Why can't Chaehyun get the same treatment? At least you can excuse Bahie and Xiaoting being at the back with their height. What's your excuse for Chaehyun? These positions and adjustments to center time, etc. should solve a lot of our problems with fandom toxicity. By treating everyone as equally as humanly possible, while giving positions where they were earned, fans have little to reasonably complain about. By rotating members constantly, they have even less to complain about, and the same goes for creating official positions, which will have the added benefit of quelling the majority of position speculation and arguments. It would be even better if they had a system where someone could graduate to a higher level of position if they trained enough. So, for instance, let's say like Mashiro or Bahie train enough that they can become main vocal level. Well, in that case, we move them up to being main vocalists. We make an official statement about it. These may seem like things a company shouldn't bother with or wouldn't care about. But again, the foresight from the final lineup and the disappointed live chats for the lineup announcement tell us about our fandom and tell us again that it is volatile. All these things will help create a better and less toxic fan environment, which Wake One should care about, because a fandom that is too toxic will actively lose fans, discourage new fans, and lead to the downfall of the group, something which partially happened to Kep1er and was only averted because they literally disbanded before they could sink into Nugudom. A happy fan environment is a less toxic one, which means more fans join and current fans are happy. And you know what that means? More album sales, probably. It's not like a toxic fandom leading to groups losing fans is like a new thing in K-pop. We see that a lot of groups like, Blackpink, who have very strong solo fandoms, will lose a lot of popularity that they could have had purely because of solo stans. It's also kind of happened with groups like IVE, LE SSERAFIM's fandom toxicity has led to a lot of that, etc. Make use of Chaehyun's massive fandom, Xiaoting's popularity in China, Yujin's Cheshire's, and Bahie's worldwide popularity to sell as many albums as possible. Here I'll insert a quick little side note to talk about stage names. The whole group use their regular names as stage names, which is fine, I'm not suggesting anything different, with one exception, Bahie's surname. It is very obvious that Wake One and/or Mnet chose to include Bahie's surname in an attempt to capitalize off the clout of Huening-kai. Did it work? I don't know, but I do know that it made many people, including her fans, her aunties, and even people who had no stake in this at all, very angry. Bahie has said time and time again that she prefers Hie over either her full name or even just straight Bahie, and towards the end of Kep1er's career, she gave up all pretenses, and at concerts and such, she started introducing herself as Hie rather than Huening Bahie. Not only is her full name needlessly long, plainly clout-seeking, and fuel for her aunties, it's also just not what she wants. I'm torn on what to call her in my rework. On one hand, she likes Hie, has a solo fandom using the name Hie, calls herself Hie, and is called Hie by the members. On the other hand, every other member uses their full name, not a nickname. There's no Shiro or Karu, only Mashiro and Hikaru. So I'll stick with Bahie for this video, but I think that either Hie or Bahie would be nice and would work too. Alright, moving on. Kep1er never had a Korean tour, Asian tour, or world tour, only ever one Japanese tour. While this makes sense, since they are very popular in Japan, it's also a shame. They have fans in Korea and they have a very big worldwide fan base that they could milk more money out of, and they just didn't. Even IZ*ONE had a small Asian tour at the end of their careers, and that was in the middle of COVID. Yes, Kep1er went to a lot of international events, but they could have taken more advantage of an international fan base and attempted to gain more popularity outside of Japan. Other than Japan, most of their listeners on Spotify come from Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And the members collectively got huge numbers of international votes in the final round of Girls Planet. Obviously, not all of these votes and not all of these listeners will translate to concert sales, but it shows that they have an audience there. I mean, if there's over 30,000 people in Jakarta who listen to Kep1er monthly, and that's only on Spotify, and we assume that a good chunk of this is people who are either children or don't have enough disposable income to go to a concert, we still have, at a conservative estimate, like 5,000 people who would pay to see Kep1er live. Probably more if we consider children whose parents will buy tickets for them, and people who will come from around the country and from nearby countries. It's not huge, sure, but other groups have justified concerts with less attendees overseas, so why can't Kep1er? And that's not even considering places like America and Singapore, where K-pop is huge, and China, where shouting is obviously popular. I'm sure Kep1er would be able to sell pretty well in Australia too. I see a lot of fans running around. I strongly believe that the lack of international tours has stunted Kep1er's money-making potential and popularity and salience internationally. It's not like they weren't popular enough, and it's not like they weren't old enough to do world tours. Other groups have been younger and done them. My rework of Kep1er will include a remedy of this concern which has bothered international fans for ages. How? I'll get to that when I get to the timeline, people. Next, a lack of group identity. As I mentioned previously, almost all of Kep1er's comebacks have had vastly different vibes, and this would be fine. Plenty of groups have wildly different vibes between comebacks, but the problem is those groups all have something to tie them together and to give them identity. 17 have their performance style and focus on the theme of music. Idol have their focus on social topics and unique lyrics. Red Velvet and Blackpink have their dual concepts and musical identity, and TXT and Billy have unique storylines. Even NMIXX, through creating an identity that is no identity and chaos, have created an identity for themselves. I remember it was a joke back in maybe like mid to late 2022 that NMIXX had a super strong identity of bad music, and even this was more than Kep1er had. So my rework will give them an identity. How? I'll come back to it. They also seem to have had lacking budgets and production values compared to IZ*ONE and Zero Base One. There are two ways to do this. First, to increase production values through putting more time into sets, props, and more thought-out concepts. And second, to literally just pour more money into them. I'm a big fan of number one as an option, but either would work. Then we have the poor timing of their comebacks. As I mentioned, they released an album on the same day as IVE, when they directly compete with IVE and haven't put in the effort to have the same hype for said album as IVE did. This is just really silly on Wakeone's part. We can obviously only predict comebacks to a certain degree. I mean, we as a company aren't psychic. But we can do two things. First, we can listen to industry rumours about who will have comebacks when, and plan around it. Second, we can have things planned in advance and be willing to move them around if needed. And I'll add a third little option. We can also just generally work on gaining hype for albums. As many people have pointed out, Kep1er have never had a pre-release track other than Straight Line and possibly Grand Prix, both of which were too little too late, and in the Japanese market, not Korean. They were also, as I said earlier, done terribly. So I'll take a look at their timings and try to make them better. Stay posted to see how. This also relates to the lackluster end to their careers that I mentioned. I want Kep1er to go out on a bang and make a long-lasting mark on the industry. Again, stay posted for exactly how I plan to do that. And finally, I want to give them a storyline. So, how will I do that? In this section, let's start from the start and take a nice long journey through Kep1er's new history, from announcement to disbandment. Let's have a quick recap of the last section, because yes, it got long. Girls Planet airs, we get the group that we get. Wakeone puts out a statement welcoming all of the members into the group unconditionally, and takes action against malicious commenters. They also announce the official positions of the members around the time of debut. Additionally, the fandom name is announced as Solars, with all the meaning I explained for that earlier. Now we're ready to introduce the world to Kep1er's concept, their debut and their career. I thought about reworking their career as others have done. I, in particular, enjoyed Everglow Up and Into Orbit's videos about the topic. I also enjoyed another video which allocated each of the members a planet in the solar system and a corresponding Greek god, but I unfortunately can't find that video again to credit that person. Most of these reworks either completely rearranged Kep1er's albums and concept, or used songs from other groups to represent concepts. And as great as these ideas were, I don't think really either of them is needed. Kep1er have a great concept in The Two Suns and in Kep1er's Strange Market. They have great connections to space through Girls' Planet, which could be continued. And their albums actually have pretty good cohesiveness within each album. The issue is between albums and keeping the story up. So let's discuss their concept. Kep1er's new concept will take some inspiration from Girls' Planet, their teasers, and the first few albums they released, which Wake One would no doubt have planned in advance. In this version, the 9 members of Kep1er are aliens, who have contacted each other and Solar to connect. They've come down to Earth and now do 3 main things. First, they explore a new world. Second, they protect the dreams of Solars and cheer Solars on from the sidelines. Remember, keep on going. And 3, they learn more about the superpowers that they naturally have as aliens. The purpose of Kep1er in the K-pop industry will be to present a unique set of charms, based on the members and the concept, and to cheer on their fans. So let's discuss the powers and charms that I allocated to each member. I didn't want to go with a generic "they have superpowers," because that's been done many times by many K-pop groups. Just off the top of my head and without any research, I can think of TXT, EXO, ENHYPEN, and Team, and maybe even groups like NMIXX and aespa, who all have generic superpowers, although some of those groups like TXT and aespa have put a spin on those. Although I have included some generic superpowers where needed, I have tried to make Kep1er's more unique, less world-ending and superhero-y, and more magical girl and everyday magic. These superpowers came out of the charms that I think best suit each member. And to continue to acknowledge our group structure, I've done some special things, like giving each of the centers 2 charms and 2 powers rather than just 1. I've also given each member affinities to particular celestial bodies and concepts, based on their charms and powers, and these will allow us to group them into pairs, trios, and so on. They'll also serve as nice little visual calling cards for each member, so for instance, if a moon appears in a shot, it's probably a reference to one of the moon members. I also want to make the group as a whole a little bit quirky, the way they were portrayed in Kep1er's Strange Market, which is possibly one of their best pieces of media. So let's take a look. Since Chaehyun is the centre of the whole group and thus should be one of the people we see the most, I decided to give her the charms of passion and cosmic radiance. This means that she represents the passion of the group to succeed and to protect Solars, and that, as the centre of the group, she is the source of their radiance, which comes from, well, the cosmos. This is a space group. Chaehyun's 2 powers are her future sight, being able to see the future, and her ability to bring colour into the world. Basically, she'll be able to change the colour of things, make them shine, or even just paint colours into the air, like those 3 fairies from that one Barbie movie. Chaehyun will be associated with the aurora, space dust, and the Milky Way itself, all of which represent her literal cosmic radiance. Since she is the centre of the group as a whole, I decided to give her a 3rd affinity, the sun, literally the centre of the solar system. Bahie is the face of the group, so although she doesn't get a 2nd power, I thought it would be good to give her something special. The Kep1er's Strange Market VCR gave me a lot of inspiration for it. Bahie's charm is creating joy, which makes sense since she has been labelled as a mood maker of the group and is generally a kind and happy person. Her power is to store memories, which she will do in Kep1er's Strange Market. For instance, when the girls go into the coloured portals and visit the worlds of their past comebacks and releases, they feel joy. Bahie is the one who guards these portals and colours and who facilitates both Kep1er and Solar's reliving their happy memories. She also needs to make sure these happy memories aren't destroyed. This, and her face of the group position, manifest as her being the voice of the group. She's the narrator in their shorts and VCRs, including, as we have seen, Kep1er's Strange Market. Bahie's affinity will be with the Aurora too, pairing her and Chaehyun together. This has the nice side effect of 1. Hopefully appeasing Bahie's fandom, and 2. Creating a pair which we know sounds good together. See Bahie and Chaehyun's cover of Truly. Yujin is a co-leader of the group, and through her time on Girls Planet she showed her love for the stage and for others, as well as for performing, and her great storytelling skills on stage. I felt that her charm is the charm of, well, I don't really have the words for it, the charm of having charm? Having the ability to sincerely express her emotions and draw people in. Hence, her power is the power of empathy. She can transfer emotions, take emotions from people, put new emotions in, share emotions, amplify them, and so on. This would improve her leadership skills and allow her to protect Solar's better as she can take negative emotions from them. Yujin's affinity is with the moon. Dion, as both a main dancer and main rapper, is a very energetic person, so I allocated her the charm of being energetic and showing great energy on stage, a key thing for dance-oriented K-pop groups. This means she will also amplify the energy of the group. Her power is control over electricity, and her affinity is with celestial bodies like asteroids and meteors, both of which have the potential for great energy and which can have a great impact if they collide with other bodies. Also, energy has the danger of using too much and burning yourself up too quickly. A meteor which burns as it enters the atmosphere is beautiful and full of energy, but it can also be destroyed by this energy. Very poetic for both a K-pop group and their storyline. Youngin's charm is her ability to do well in all concepts, her ability to shine. Hence, her superpower is the ability to control light, and her affinity is with the stars. I don't have much to say about her since this is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory, and it was super easy to pick a concept for her. Yeso's charm is the sincerity she brings to the group as the maknae, being perceived with innocence and purity, with her bright face and ability to shine well in concepts like Giddy and I Do Do You, which discuss first loves. She'll represent this joy at new discoveries in the group, and the need to love and be close to Solar. To reflect this need to get closer to Solar as soon as possible, her power will be teleportation, and her affinity reflecting her pure desires will be with the moon. Hikaru is often shown in Kep1er's storyline in combination with radio equipment and other technological gadgets. K-pop rappers are usually portrayed as more down-to-earth and practical than their beautiful and godly vocal counterparts. So, considering both of these things, I think Hikaru's charm should be connection. Through her rap, she is able to connect with Solar and the other members, and thus her power is to control technology and her affinity is with the stars. As a center of the group, she also gets a second charm, that charm being unity. As an international member, a rapper, a dancer, and being able to sing, Hikaru connects all positions, and also helps connect the members, as she's demonstrated leadership skills in the past. This also relates to her connection and communication charm. By controlling technology, Hikaru sends messages which connect the members and Solar, and groups which understand each other are more able to be unified. Hikaru's second power to reflect this will be telepathy, and her second affinity will be with the sun, since the suns represent the unity of Kep1er and their Solars. Mashiro is our second co-leader, and her charm is elegance. She always carries herself with grace, in performances, to the members and fans, in her leaderships, in her victories and defeats, and so on. I feel that her elegance and gracefulness over Girls Planet have brought her many fans, including me, Her superpower, reflecting her understated elegance and her ability to bind people together and do great things from behind the scenes, will be lay magic, or general magic. This means she's kind of a jack of all trades. She can do most things, but none of them are super powerful. For instance, she may be able to teleport or levitate small objects, but not larger ones or people. She can encourage plants to grow well, but not to bloom and sprout right away. She can hide small secrets in objects, but can't create and hold entire memories like Bahie. She can create a small blip in Hikaru's technological systems, or impress vague emotions onto people rather than controlling them exactly like Yujin. She can heal wounds, but she can't grow back legs or anything. She might be able to get a vibe about the future, but nothing explicit like what Chaehyun could get. The little things that create lots of magic in the world. That's what she does. Mashiro is just full of magic, but subtle magic, not loud and bombastic like Hikaru, Chaehyun, and Daeyeon. By pure coincidence, her powers and Yujin's powers complement each other to help the group come together well. Mashiro's affinity is with the moon. Finally, Xiaoting, whose first charm is duality. Like Youngin, she can cover many concepts and portray many stories, but she is of course better in elegant and more mature concepts than brighter ones. Xiaoting's power related to this charm is shapeshifting. She primarily uses the form of a cat, as we see in Galileo. This gives her an affinity with meteors, like Daeyeon. Meteors can be beautiful, but they can also be dangerous. I mean, they've caused at least one mass extinction. Xiaoting's second charm is her beauty. She will be the representation of beauty in this group. Her second power will be the ability to manipulate and control precious stones. For instance, she will be able to amplify the effects already associated with them. For example, amethysts are believed to have healing properties, so she would be able to amplify this and use them as like makeshift bandages, or you rub it over the wound and the wound disappears. I also like to believe that she is the oldest alien in the group and has been around for hundreds of years. She likes to travel and she likes to document beautiful things. She collects pressed flowers, photographs, gemstones, etc. We saw this in Galileo in our timeline as she was the curator of the museum. This will also put her in league with Bahie, who preserves memories. Xiaoting's second affinity is with the moon, which also associates her with Mashiro, who can also heal people. So let's summarize which celestial bodies we've associated with each member. The sun with Chaehyun and Hikaru, the moon with Yujin, Yeso, Mashiro, and Xiaoting, the stars with Youngin and Hikaru, meteors with Daeyeon and Xiaoting, auroras with Bahie and Chaehyun, and Chaehyun gets the third association of space dust / the Milky Way, whatever you want to say. Kep1er together are represented by an aurora of colours and charms which they bring to the fans' lives, and which reflects how beautiful they and their careers will be. The aurora is dominated by their calling card colour of lavender, which will become a symbol for the group. Since Chaehyun is the overall centre of the group and Bahie is the face of the group, those are the two members we associate with the aurora. It can get a bit complicated and may well need to be cut down in practice, but overall I think the symbolism here will 1. Make the fans more interested in the group and analysing their content, 2. Give each of the girls a spotlight, and 3. Aid the storytelling of Kep1er's music videos. At this point, you may also be a bit concerned about everything I've been saying about the members so far, because I've used a decent number of later in Kep1er's career music videos, like Galileo, as evidence for why I made choices. But Casper, those music videos wouldn't be out yet. How do you know what would happen? Well, if Wake 1 were to follow my plan, the entirety of Kep1er's 2.5-year career would be planned in advance. Wake 1 would know things like Xiaoting being the museum curator in Galileo, so they wouldn't need to worry about extra evidence or what has or hasn't come out yet. It would all be planned in advance. You may then ask, But what if these weren't the members of Kep1er? Well, I'll demonstrate towards the end of the video how Wake 1 could have created a plan that would work for almost any combination of trainees, and we will demonstrate this by applying this concept to my own ideal lineup from Girls Planet 999. The storyline itself can't get too complicated since we only have 2.5 years. It wouldn't be a good idea to make it complicated. Kep1er don't need lunar-level Inception storylines. They don't need to try and confuse and fool their audience. What they do need is a complete and satisfying story which lets them have an artistic impact on the industry. Hence, as much as I love it, none of Chromashin's multiple universes. Let's stick to a relatively simple concept, the hero's journey. So basically, Kep1er's main overarching concept, somewhat separate from their storyline, will be that they are magical girls from space who are cheering on their fans, encouraging them to keep on going. A lot of their styling will be inspired by magical girls. For an example of how this could work in K-pop, you can look at IVE's Ascendio, although that's far from the only way to do it. This concept would also give them a nice base to fall back on in the event that they do renew, even though the storyline I've planned is designed to be completed by the time they disband in July 2024. Anyway, in the event that they do renew, Wake 1 can just keep going with this same concept, and make more songs that lyrically are basically just cheerleading on the fans. And they can create new stories and visual themes out of the very versatile magical girl concept. Also, since I want Kep1er's albums to all flow together well and be recognisably Kep1er, I want to give them a common naming convention. They're magical girls, and, well, who is the most well-known magical girl? Sailor Moon, of course. Sailor Moon's episode naming structure occasionally includes acts. Or at least I thought they did. I was so sure I'd seen them in the episodes, but I couldn't actually find them when I looked them up. Ah well. Either way, I'm sticking with acts and with theatre-related imagery, which is somewhat related to Sailor Moon. Prologues, interludes, and epilogues will be used to name the albums. Post-renewal, several systems could be used. We could establish a second play as such with its own acts and arcs, but that could get confusing. You'd have 2 albums named Act 1, 2 albums named Act 2, etc. Alternatively, we could lean into other theatre imagery, calling their extra albums asides that fit into the main story. Or we could move to books, and instead have Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and so on. There's lots of options. So now that we've covered the concept, let's run through Kep1er's actual career. I'll take a small aside here for a little spoiler. Compared to IZ*ONE, probably the best comparison group for Kep1er, Kep1er have relatively few songs. I took a quick and rough count, and over their career, IZ*ONE released roughly 37 unique Korean songs and 14 unique Japanese songs. They had a debut album with 8 songs and had a full Korean album a little more than a year into their careers, followed by a Japanese studio album. Kep1er, in comparison, released 35 unique Korean songs and 11 unique Japanese songs, with a full Korean album only right at the end of their careers, and with less songs than IZ*ONE's full album, and 1 Japanese full album, again, right at the end of their careers, which, out of 15 songs, only had about 5 new ones. Their debut album also only had 5 tracks in comparison, one of which, See the Light, was an intro, and 3 of which were Girls Planet songs. In my opinion, this is not only a bad marketing move, but also pretty disrespectful to the members of Kep1er. So let's change that. I've added some extra songs at the end of their career and in different albums, so let's jump in a race car and run down the racetrack of Kep1er's career. First, debut date. You know I was already baffled at Wake 1's poor management, but when I found out what their original debut date was supposed to be, I think I had a hernia. The idiocy was through the roof. For context, Kep1er debuted on January 3rd, 2022, but this debut date was pushed back since some of the members had contracted COVID. Their originally planned debut date was December 14th. December 14th. The 14th! What's so bad about that, you may ask? Well, December 14th is only a mere 13 days away from Kep1er's birthday, which is on December 27th. Which idiot at Wake One decided it would be a good idea to not debut them on the literal birthday of their namesake? It's impossible for me to explain in words how stupid this is. They were only 13 days away from Kep1er's birthday, and they decided to debut the group on the 14th? Insane. Even worse, had they debuted Kep1er on Kep1er's birthday, not only would they have given the group a good start in terms of a solid identity related to their namesake, but it would also have been exactly 450 years since Kep1er had been born. A nice, even number. It's such a simple thing to do, and they didn't do it. Anyway, so I'm going to start from the start and announce Kep1er's debut for the 27th of December. Now, the simple fact that they were preparing for a different debut date could have led the members to not getting COVID, and they may well have been able to debut on the 27th, butterfly effect and all. But we can never know, so let's make a backup option. I, as Wake One, know that something could go wrong. COVID is the obvious answer, but a member could break a leg, get in a car accident, a tsunami could happen, whatever. If something happens and Kep1er can't debut on the 27th, I'll set up a backup debut date. February 15th, 2022. Why this date? Well, yes, it is about a month and a half after the planned debut, but it's also Galileo's birthday. Yep, but why Galileo other than the obvious fact that they will eventually end up having a title track called Galileo? Well, Kep1er in his lifetime was a big believer in Galileo, and a big supporter of Galileo. So we can use this K-pop group to represent that relationship. Galileo was Kep1er's senior, and influenced him, so by Kep1er debuting on Galileo's birthday, we can express that Kep1er looks up to Galileo, and reflect the literal connection between the two back when they lived like 400 years ago. Now, you may say that this debut date is too far away from the end of Girls' Planet, and from the original debut date. They may have lost all of their hype. Well, first, I don't think they would have lost all the hype, especially if they keep trickling out teasers, or even released the first few episodes of their reality show. But second, if Wake One actually gets worried about the hype dying, there's a simple option. Galileo died on January 8th, so we just move the debut date then and advertise it as commemorating his death with an acknowledgement of his legacy, heliocentrism, since it would have been 380 years since his death and Kep1er have a heliocentric concept. There's also an important thing for me to say here. Most of Kep1er's songs have pre-existing motifs which would be great for the concept and story I laid out above. Almost every single Kep1er song, especially at the beginning of their careers, mentioned dreams, moving fast, whether it be running, flying, racing, etc., imagination, the sun and stars, and similar motifs. I'll keep all of these, they work well with what I described, but we will have to make an obvious few tweaks for things like the fact that the members now all have specific superpowers, and to adjust for the symbolism I outlined. For instance, we wouldn't have Chaehyun singing about stars, we'd have someone like Youngin or Hikaru, and Bahiye and Chaehyun would be the best people to sing about dreams or colours. So although I will mention specific instances, you can assume that if I don't mention anything, most of these songs will have some small choreography, lyricism, music video, etc. tweaks to make them fit my storyline more. Now let's talk album promos. I think Kep1er's Connection film was good, but it would obviously need to be adjusted a little bit for their new concept. Let's discuss that in a moment. So, Kep1er debut. On December 27th, January 8th, or February 15th, depending on what's going on in the industry. Their debut album will be titled First Connection, since it represents the first connection they make with each other and their fans in the storyline. I've bulked out the track list a little bit to conceptualize their story better and give the fans more to work with. First, let me mention the Creation Mission songs. Utopia, Snake, Shoot, and You Plus Me Equals Love. Many fans wanted Kep1er versions of these songs, but other than a single unit stage for Snake and You Plus Me, we never got them. I think this is silly because they are produced songs that Mnet has, so why not get some use out of them? But we can't just chuck them all into one album, I feel like that would seem cheap. So I've divided them among Kep1er's first 4 Korean albums depending on the concept of each album and to help express the story. First Connection, or Chapter 1 First Connection, will introduce the story of the group, and to commemorate them leaving Girls' Planet behind them and coming into a new world, will feature a past, present, future layout, both in the tracks chosen and the 3 versions of the album. The 4 tracks representing the past will be in order: OOO, their first song together; You Plus Me Equals Love, the winning creation mission song and one which fits the elegance the album will have; and then Shine and Another Dream, which were already on the first Impact album. These songs will give a nostalgia hit to fans, and You Plus Me should get everyone excited. They'll emphasize the idea of connectedness and connection in this album. To bring us towards the future, we'll add another track, Interlude Connection, which will be a conceptual spoken narration track. Think things like ATs or in hyphens intros and outros, which gives something like a poem with a bit of a soundtrack that describes the story of the album. In Kep1er's case, this track will be the narration from their debut M Countdown stage, which describes the silence of space, and then the message that is sent by a lone girl, Chaehyun, before she connects with the group and then with the fans to create the auroral dream, or Kep1er's lavender aurora taking over the world. So, if you want to know what that interlude would sound like, watch that stage intro. This gives the stage more meaning as it includes the interlude track. And this audio can also be used and/or adapted into the new Connection film, which would, well, demonstrate the girls sending a message and connecting, and would aim to have a demonstration of all of their powers, which should be pretty easy to do. Here's a storyboard with some simple shots that could be included. After the interlude, we are in the present era, with 3 tracks. First, Wadada. Second, our new title track, Mask. Most fans were far more invested in Mask than Wadada. Wadada was catchy and all, and would be a good promotional B-side, but Mask was the standout. It had a powerful message and an elegant concept which suited each and every member of the group well. Although Mask was only rarely mentioned or performed by Kep1er, it has 16 million plays on Spotify. Nowhere near Wadada, but we've got to keep in mind that title tracks automatically get played more as they're added to playlists and such. Mask has, I believe, more streams than any other Kep1er B-sides, and has more streams than some of their later title tracks. And I think that, and the performance video views it boasts, shows that it would have been the best title track. Almost every single Kep1er remake I've seen, and most complaints I see too, say that Mask should have been their debut title track. So let's make it the title track. But how does Wake One know in advance that this will be the more popular track? Well, first, a title track automatically becomes more popular, so just by promoting it, they'll make it more popular. But more importantly, Mask would be somewhat unique in the industry at the time, with most songs being either super upbeat or super girl crush. Ives' 11 and Kep1er's Mask would both be a breath of fresh air. Also, the choreography for Wadada was pretty disliked, as many felt that it and the chorus itself was pretty cringy and immature, and we can predict that by looking at what K-pop fans like in choreography in other groups. Now is where we have an issue. Wadada's choreography is only childish if you don't know what it is. Once you realize that it's supposed to be a representation of the two suns in the sky, it becomes pretty good. So I would probably still remove the chorus choreography since that's a bit much, and give them something that shows their dance skills more. And I would change the lyrics in the chorus to be less and more storyline. So for this album, we have Mask as a title track with a music video. The music video will portray the girls coming together after they were connected during the interlude, and moving closer to each other and to Solar. It will focus on the concept of true selves, where each of the members will have a mask which will later reveal their faces. These masks, well, they need to be cool, let's just say that. I would really like it if Kep1er had more of the space goddess style that was shown in the bridge in Up. Bahiye and Yujin were shown in these glorious space crowns, and I think that 1. Every member of Kep1er should get one, and that 2. They should be a pretty consistent symbol for each member, a bit like aespa's similar headdresses, and 3. They should all have some kind of mask which covers the face and would be used for space travel. Each one would include the members' celestial affinities. Here are some rough ideas. Let me give a quick rundown of these ideas, roughly what inspired them and how they could be done. Keep in mind that these are incredibly quick and basic ideas, like it took less than 5 minutes to do each one. Wake1 with all of their resources should be able to do far better than me. All of these headdresses would use a combination of wire, fabric, and crystals. For Chaehyun, I wanted to express the ideas of the sun, aurora, and space dust, with her being the centre of the group. For this, I gave her a large central disk for the sun, with smaller disks on either side which have wavy aurora patterns throughout, and crystals to represent the space dust. I think this would look best with space buns, which would align with the outer disks, and would, of course, visually tie her to Sailor Moon. For Bahiye, I wanted to use the flowing shapes of the aurora. Hers would be largely made with styled strips of iridescent fabric and wire with tassels to accentuate them. I wanted this to be worn easily with her hair out, which is how I personally think she looks best, and the strands of this aurora on her head would be able to mingle with her hair. For Yujin, I wanted to represent the fullness of the moon to go in line with the fullness of empathy that she feels because of her powers. Hence, I used a series of moons and the smaller crystal pieces with some extra glam, of course, because she is a magical girl, she's got to be a bit glam. I think this would be best with 2 pigtails. For Dion, I wanted to communicate the explosive power of both electricity and comets. This one would need a bit more work to look good, I think, but could definitely be done, with a bit of creativity with the lightning-shaped wire. For Youngin, I wanted to express the pure beauty of the stars, so her entire headdress is made from an empty frame with strands of crystal stars. For Yeso, I wanted to express the concept of teleportation between the planets, with her affinity with the moon, so I created this design which uses the hourglass shapes to represent teleportation between the phases of the moon, the moons themselves being made up of black and white crystals depending on their phase. I also wanted to glam her up a bit, so included dangling crystals in the shape of hearts to express her role in the group as a lovely maknae, and the basis of her powers, which is loving Kep1er. For Hikaru, I wanted to give her something that could act as an antennae for her powers, and which could represent the sun and the stars. I recycled the concept of Yujin's headdress from Up and changed it slightly so that it still looks like the sun with stars on it, but changed the length of the metal prongs so it looks like she has a series of radio antennae, another classic magical girl thing. For Mashiro, I wanted to express her softness with lots of circles. I included the moon in the center of her headdress to show her affinity and then used full moon circles to fill out the rest of her design, and leaf-shaped strands and flower shapes to give her some glam and represent her powers. I think this is another one where the moon shapes would look great inside the space buns. For Xiaoting, I wanted to express her beauty and give her an otherworldly look, so I created the cobbets to cover her ears and act like magical girl hair accessories, and I made the rest of the headdress with wires and moon shapes. I also gave her some hanging crystals, which will help tie her to the other members of the group visually and will emphasize her beauty like earrings. Overall, these could definitely use some improvements, especially for practicality. Kep1er would need to have 3 versions of these for each member. A simple version they can use for performances, a glammed up version for photo shoots and music videos, and a broken version for, well, that comes later. But even though these could do with some work, I still think they're pretty good, or at least they're far, far better than the nothingness that Wake1 gave us. They're supposed to be ethereal space girls, so make them ethereal space girls, Wake1. So, Mask would feature each member coming together, starting with Chaehyun's signal. It would include glamour shots that portray each member's superpowers. See my discussion of the connection films for some ways in which that could be shown. We would also get the 2 suns in the sky, which start to orbit closer together. The music video would start in black and white, and then colours would be added as each member took off their mask and joined, eventually ending up with full colour and the aurora covering the world. Kep1er now occupy a radio station on a hill in the middle of the forest, from which they can see the beautiful aurora and the 2 suns, and their reflections in the lake below, with Hikaru holding a tablet holding Solar's message. Yes, we copy. They now need to journey to Solar on Earth. After the credits, we see that Chaehyun looks a bit distracted. We see a glint in her eye and zoom through it to see her vision. A tiny spot of what looks like ink in the corner of the main room of said radio station. After Mask, we have See the Light, this time reworked into a full song. The lyrics will also be changed slightly to reflect the changed storyline. The purpose of See the Light here is to bridge the gap between present and future. See the Light's new lyrics will reflect its name. Kep1er can now see the light of the 2 suns, and the light of a new dream and a new future which they will race towards. Finally, to complete the album, we have a new outro, called New Journey. The outro will be more of a traditional outro, as in only an instrumental. The instrumental will represent the next stage of their journey. In this case, it will tease the next album by presenting a slightly remixed version of Le Voyage's instrumental. By setting up a system where the outros of previous albums tease the following ones, we can keep fans invested, as they want to keep coming back and visiting both old and new albums to see where the story goes. It also creates continuity in the storyline, as the outros will lead into the concept and vibes, as such, of the next album. In this case, we want to tease our audience that the next album will be a brighter concept, which Le Voyage's instrumental works well with. The instrumental will be uplifting and exciting and calming all at the same time. It works well for the title of A New Journey, as well as for an outro to this album, in contrast with the more confident tones of See the Light. Why Le Voyage? You'll find out. As you'll notice, I think Kep1er's albums have really good theming in general. All of the songs fit together well, but the order and storytelling needs to be changed. So that's what I'm doing. Next things next, Queendom. Most Kep1erians agree that sending Kep1er to Queendom was a bad decision, both in terms of marketing and in terms of the mental health of the members. I discussed that earlier. So, in this universe, we won't send Kep1er to Queendom. It's not some decision we need to have massive foresight to make correctly. Even at the time, Wake1 and Mnet should have been able to realise, oh, this group only have 2.5 songs to their name and next to no performance experience in the industry. They're tired from their previous album and preparations for their first comeback, and they're still traumatised from Girls' Planet and not fully used to working together. Maybe they won't do a very good job on Queendom. At the end of the day, the literal only reason to put Kep1er on Queendom was to gain publicity for them, right? And it didn't do a good job at that. They should have realised that the popularity of Vivez and Luna especially would overshadow Kep1er. But I can understand the importance of sending Kep1er to Queendom, in that they were exposed to the fandoms of other girl groups, some with very different concepts, which would have gained them new fans. I mean, WJSN literally have a space concept, so if you were exposed to a bunch of fans who already like space concepts and you have a space concept, well, that's just good marketing. But I think there are ways to do this that are better for Kep1er and for the other artists on the show, so let me tell you my plan. Instead of Kep1er, Mnet gets someone like Dreamcatcher on Queendom, who deserves the potential spotlight. And because we want to advertise Kep1er, we do something else instead. We bring Kep1er on for one of the rounds. Whichever round, it doesn't matter, but maybe the round where each group performs their own songs? That doesn't matter. What does matter is that Kep1er will come on and we will introduce them as a powerful, charming, and versatile new rookie group. Not a global group, just a powerful and record-breaking girl group, since, well, their debut did kind of break some records. Then we get Kep1er to do a special performance of Mask and say that the focus of the next round is on one's true self, aka Kep1er have set the mood for the round. Kep1er will be special judges for that round and will get to run a special sports day with the contestant groups, which will create a lot of interactions and friendships. Now, let me be clear here. People would still hate Mnet for so blatantly and terribly trying to promote Kep1er, and it would be more than a little bit weird to have a rookie group judging more experienced ones. But I think that if Kep1er must be on Queendom, and it seems they must, this is the best way to do it. This way means they aren't traumatized by being on a survival show again, and they aren't judged by literally everyone in the industry for being sent on such a show with only 2.5 songs. Basically, almost all of the downsides of Kep1er being on Queendom are gone, but we still get almost all of the upsides. They still get to be promoted on such a unique show, they still get to interact with and learn from senior groups, they still get to have emotional moments about working together, and they can still get to put on a unique and stellar performance, Queendom style. We can BS justify them being judges by pointing to their great debut album sales, and how they are experienced on survival shows and on showing their true selves and all sides of themselves on survival shows. Hence, we can kind of justify them judging the Queendom groups on their performances and abilities to do just that. Now, since they aren't competing, they only get to put on one stage, but that's fine. One is less stress and it still lets us enjoy their performance and storyline, because as I said, they did have some hints of storyline on Queendom, but they also had an incredibly inconsistent story/concept on Queendom. Kep1er's Mask performance on Queendom will have an orchestral remix, and the new choreography will showcase their powers, similar to how TXT and Hyphen, EXO and ANTEAM have demonstrated their powers and storyline through choreography. And they'll get to wear their masks from the Mask MV, which will no doubt look super cool in real life. At the end, we get the nice symbolism of the two suns and a tiny black spot in the centre. So that's Queendom. What about our favourite Queendom song, The Girls? I'll get to it. So now it's about time for Kep1er's first comeback, right? Now, we know from Up that Wake1 wanted to make this a nice summer comeback. The only problem was, since it was their first comeback, it kind of destroyed their identity. But now we have a storyline, so we're all good. This album will make use of two things that would help it stand out and increase hype that were becoming more popular in K-pop around the time. Dual title tracks and a pre-release track. As I said earlier, whenever Kep1er did pre-releases in our timeline, they never released any new content, music video or performance-wise when the actual album came out, making it feel lackluster. So we won't do this. We'll include an MV for both songs and one of our title tracks will be the pre-release. Similarly to First Impact, many fans felt that Doublast would have been served better with Le Voyage as the title track. I considered making it the sole title track since it would be a great title track in general, and since it would serve the storyline well, but I just couldn't get rid of how important Up was to their legacy. To this day, Up is one of Kep1er's most loved title tracks, and its upbeat summer concept is just great. I couldn't just get rid of it as such, so dual title tracks. We'll rename the album Impact since it represents Kep1er's impact on the new world of Earth, now that they have come down from space and are connected with Solar. Also, literally no one liked the name Doublast. It will be released on the same day as in our timeline, June 20th, 2022. The album will have dual title tracks, the aforementioned Up and Le Voyage, and Up will be released as a pre-release track on June 5th, complete with a music video and some promotions. Let's run through the tracks before we discuss said music video. First, we'll have a conceptual intro, Utopia from Girls Planet. Utopia will set the tone for the album, the introduction to a literal utopia, a world where they can explore and learn new things and be together with Solar. Just a mini little spoiler, Utopia also means a place that doesn't exist, so watch out for that. This will be followed up by the pre-release title track Up, and then our second title track Le Voyage. Then we have Goodnight and Rewind, as on the Doublast album. Finally, we'll follow up with another instrumental outro. In this case, the outro is called Fly, and will be sampled from Wing Wing's instrumental. Now for the MVs. Up's music video will show the members leaving their radar station and following the light of the two suns to land on Earth. They'll fly there like magical girls, think League of Legends Star Guardians, with their flight masks on, and will crash down in the middle of a city. The rest of the music video will be pretty much just them exploring the city, trying new things, trying to hide their powers from random citizens, going to the beach and having fun, summer stuff, and having a fun time learning things about this new world. It will be a more candid and casual video, as fits a pre-release. The important thing to note here is that during their shenanigans, Xiaoting, the eldest and most experienced alien, will be reserved, looking nervous, like she knows something will happen. The music video ends with the girls all happily eating a picnic together near a beach, while Chaehyun looks concerned at a spot of black graffiti. Mashiro looks over and notices Chaehyun, also becoming concerned. The music video for Le Voyage will be similar to what we currently have for Up. The girls exploring the forest around their new house, this new house that resembles their radar station but is clearly human, not alien. They're trying out fun human activities and playing pranks on each other, like Yeso teleporting people into the middle of the human suburban street, or Xiaoting getting caught in a game of tag and turning into a cat to avoid it. They'll often gesture to the camera as we, the Solars, are now connected to them and are involved in their journey. It's kind of a break the fourth wall / act like the camera is your fans. This music video will also include a kind of dream world, similar to the dream world from Up, where the girls get their elaborate headdresses and look like goddesses. This world will be a representation of Bahie's memory library, and the girls can watch their happy memories together. A light-hearted music video, relatively sparing on storyline, and more of a cute, include the fans in our little comeback thing. At the end of the music video in her dream world, Bahie notices the memory of Chaehyun's obsession with the black spot of graffiti, and files away this not-so-happy memory in her grimoire. After this comeback, Kep1er have a few international activities to take part in. They go to Universe Con and the Hallyu K-pop festival at the start of July. I think when they come back from these events would be a great time to do a mini Korean tour, basically 3 to 5 concerts maximum around Korea in the areas where they have the most fans, to help build up hype for them in Korea and to bring in some extra cash and interest. It can be like a combination of a fan meet and a concert. Then it's time for their Japanese debut with Wing Wing. I changed the date to be released on August 7th, 2022, which will help switch their album groove to avoid IVE later on, and which avoids IVE's Japanese debut. I changed the name of the mini-album to Spread Your Wings to express the storyline better, and added some tracks to bulk it out. First, we have the title track Wing Wing, then Daisy, and then the Japanese versions of some of their Korean songs, Wadada, Mask, Up, and Le Voyage. Why no outro? I'll tell you in a moment. Wing Wing will be kind of a filler music video. It will show the girls each alone on their own planets before they were called together by Chaehyun. They're all bored, I wrote that with a capital B in my script, lonely, sad, and wasting away. But when Chaehyun calls them, they can come together and dream. Suiting the simpler nature of Wing Wing musically and lyrically, this music video can include small cartoony illustrations of the girls' dreams, as in their actual dreams. If these illustrations are customized by each member, they'll have even more charm. Once the girls come together, they can show off these charms, which will fill out the rest of the music video. Basically, them showing off to each other, sans superpowers. Nice and chill, except that right at the end, Bahie notices that her grimoire has a small black spot on the cover, like the spot of black graffiti. Now, this album didn't have an outro because I thought it would be better to group it with their first Korean single, Sugar Rush, and then lead into their next Korean comeback. While Sugar Rush is released, since it has no promotions, Kep1er are free to do what they did in our timeline. Go to Sydney's Hallyu K-pop festival and then to KCON LA in mid to late August. Sugar Rush is a universe release, but that doesn't mean it can't have storyline. Just look at ATEEZ. Sugar Rush's music video is already great and full of story, even if it's not actual Kep1er story. It shows how Kep1er protect Keplians/Solars, and it shows their dream world. I'd like to keep it pretty similar, except for 3 things. First, we'll get demonstrations of the girls' powers, in relatively simple and incidental ways, like casual things. Second, the aesthetic of the music video will be changed to better reflect those of Mask, Up, and Le Voyage, and Wing Wing. Finally, we'll have a circular storyline, kind of. At the start of the music video, we'll see Bahie, her grimoire strapped to her belt, gesture for the other girls to come over and help the young girl who's having a nightmare. Cue the rest of the music video. But at the end, Bahie lags behind. She brings out her grimoire, checks it. The black spot is still there, and she sighs. We get a flashback. Bahie watching over the girl before the music video starts, when she realizes that the darkness on her grimoire is growing. She desperately tries to wipe it off, but it doesn't work. Looking up at the girl, it becomes clear that the girl is having a nightmare, and that, as the nightmare grows, so does the darkness. Bahie calls over the other members to help with the nightmare, and we get a close-up of the grimoire as the girl plays with Kep1er in the background. And as they do, the darkness recedes, but never enough to fully disappear. Ooh, exciting! Anyway, I'll change this to be a universe single album, with the track Sugar Rush followed by an outro, First Love, which will be a remixed portion of Giddy's instrumental. Why? Again, I'll get there. But in the meantime, Kep1er will have their first fan meeting, Kep1er, from October 10th to 11th. I decided to keep the name Kep1er since it's cute and relates to their concept. The VCRs will include new footage of the girls managing the radar station, and having a picnic on the lake shore of this random planet. They'll also include a diary concept, which will be handwritten by the members, and which will include a small profile for each member, detailing their positions, their superpowers, charms, affinities, some things they like most about being on Earth, and so on. This will be styled as if the pages came out of Bahie's grimoire, like she's keeping little tabs on her members, she's storing their memories, they're all writing in the diary together, so on. This will provide some trivia for each member, and will also explicitly spell out what their powers are to aid the fans' storyline understanding. Then they'll perform at KCON Japan from October 14th to 16th, and at both Kep1er and KCON, they'll perform their upcoming pre-release track Giddy to build hype for their next release. Wait, Casper, Giddy? Didn't you just miss a whole album? What happened to Troubleshooter? Well, that's pretty simple. I wanted to use Troubleshooter for different purposes, as will soon become clear. And the fact of the matter is, the storyline just didn't work well with Troubleshooter and Lovestruck in the order they originally were. So we're changing them. Love Struck will be a good follow-up from Impact and Spread Your Wings, and will introduce a new portion of their story, falling in love, something they never had a chance to do before they came to Earth. This evens out their story, since in our world, the concept of love wasn't really introduced for Kep1er until relatively late in their careers. So let's talk Love Struck, or as I renamed it, Butterfly Effect. I used this name and changed the date of release to October 31st, 2022 to hint at some darker meaning, which will be revealed in the next album. The change in album date also allows Kep1er a bit more of a break between the release of Sugar Rush and their third Korean album. The name of the album reflects how, at this point in their storyline and careers, Kep1er can go in many directions depending on the actions they take now. And this album will be the start of a potential spiral. This album, like Impact, will make use of a pre-release dual title track structure to build hype. The pre-release track, as I mentioned earlier, will be Giddy, the music video for which will be relatively light on story but will depict the 9 members vying for the attentions of some random and seemingly uninterested guy, even going so far as to use their powers to try and impress him. It will also include some details that were in our timeline mentioned in the lyrics of the song but not so much seen in the music video, such as the ground shaking when the members fall in love, and the door to one's heart opening. We can potentially bring in, to change up the style of the music video visually, some fun dreamscapes, include funny shenanigans of the girls trying to sabotage each other's chances with the boy, more cat imagery, and so on. At the end of the music video, Yeso will discover the diary from I Do Do You, and in our post-credit scene, the door which has come to symbolise Kep1er's hearts is fully open, but the lights in the room beyond are turned off, so it looks like a gaping black hole. Giddy, as I said, will be performed as a teaser pre-release track at Kep1er and KCON, and the music video will be released on October 15th. The full album will be released on the 31st of October with the second title track, Back to the City. Back to the City is yet another track that almost everyone thought would be a better title track than Giddy. As much as people liked Giddy, they liked Back to the City much more. It was uplifting, upbeat, and nostalgic with a fun choreography and deeper meaning. Let me express to you just how popular Back to the City is compared to Giddy. Giddy currently has about 12.5 million listens on Spotify, and Back to the City has 6.8 million. More than half. This is insane. Most Kep1er title tracks have at least 3 times the number of streams or more compared to the number of streams of B-sides, but Back to the City is just that popular. Or maybe I should say Giddy just isn't as popular as many of their other title tracks, but that's not even necessarily true. Anyway, there'll be dual title tracks. Back to the City will feature the girls going on a nostalgic trip. Well, back to the city, where they initially touched down in the last album. This time at night. They'll try a lot of new activities like watching movies and trying new foods, going to a market, etc. And they'll go to a light-based art exhibit on the riverbank, which will provide us with lovely glamour shots. The moon shines onto them, reflecting the 2 colours of the 2 suns, orange and purple. As they are all together, an aurora covers the sky. Their power is so strong that it's visible even in the middle of Seoul. At the end of the music video, Youngin notices that one of the light sculptures has become unlit. She tries to imbue her powers into it, but it doesn't seem to work. So she tries harder and harder, her hand glowing stronger and stronger until it flashes too brightly, and instead turns dark. I don't mean dark as in there's no light, I mean dark as in it is made of darkness. Youngin tries again to light the sculpture, but the darkness grows and it starts to creep up her fingers. She frantically tries to brush it away, but only succeeds in splattering drops of it everywhere, like ink. Every time she uses her light to try and blast it away, it grows faster and stronger. Suddenly, Yeso and Yujin are there with her. Yeso zaps the darkness with her powers, seemingly teleporting it somewhere else random. And Yujin obviously replaces Youngin's emotions of fear and panic with calm. The 3 take a deep sigh of relief. Yeso grins brightly. I'm sure we all know her gorgeous grin. Grabs Youngin and Yujin by the hands and leads them back to the group. As they sit down, we can see that a spot of darkness has stuck to the sculpture and is slowly growing. Let's run through the structure of the album. First, we'll start with a conceptual intro, Shoot, from Girls Planet, which describes a first love that almost makes your heart explode. This will set the tone for the album well. It has the niceness of first love and is a fun song, which also has what could be considered some more sinister lyrics, like things being odd or unusual. Similarly, the lyrics of the other songs on the album will be changed slightly to include references to the butterfly effect, and to contrast dreams versus darkness. Shoot will be followed up by Giddy, and then Lovely, Back to the City, Why, and Happy Ending. Finally, we'll have another conceptual outro, in this case called Now What, which will take instrumental elements from I Do Do You, but with a darker twist. Lower in tone, a bit distorted, some horror elements, etc. At this point, depending on their popularity, Wake One can give Kep1er a short break, take a period to focus almost entirely on variety content, or they can take a small Korean or Asian tour from November 10th to 25th before coming back with their second Japanese album. Of course, I'm sure most people would rather they take a break, but let's be honest, they're a produce group, they're getting overworked. But before that album, we have award show season and Kep1er's obviously expected performance at Mama. This performance will introduce their concept to non-Seoul K-pop fans, so we'll give a rundown of the storyline to help them. The opening VCR will show Chaehyun connecting to the other members, and then the group as a whole connecting with their fans, under the symbol of the two suns. To express their desire to race towards fans, Kep1er will perform Mask and Wadada. We'll then have an acting sequence featuring our resident actor Yeso, expressing her finding the diary and falling in love with the random boy, after which Kep1er will perform Giddy with a short dance break leading into Back to the City. After Back to the City, the stage will be taken over slowly and then faster and faster by Darkness, which swallows the members and ends the performance. A nice, ominous ending. I wanted to keep this performance relatively simple concept-wise, as Kep1er's storyline hasn't completely kicked off yet, and since it's their first Mama. At other end-of-year award shows, Kep1er can cycle between performing See the Light, Wadada, Mask, Giddy, Back to the City, Up, and Le Voyage. Let's keep it simple this year, because next year will be even more spectacular in comparison. Trust me. After that, Kep1er will come back in the new year with their second Japanese mini-album. This album I have renamed The Power of Love, for relatively obvious reasons, and since they literally have superpowers, it's fun to have the double meaning of power. Since Yeso's charm is love, as with our version of I Do Do You, she'll be the main character. This will be a good opportunity to show off her acting skills, which can also be done in special performances, like those on Queendom and in music videos like in the ending of Back to the City. This mini-album will feature the following tracks in order: I Do Do You, which will be the title track, Together Forever, and then the Japanese versions of Giddy and Back to the City. Finally, we will have a conceptual outro called Crossroads, which will take a darker spin on the instrumental of The Girls. In our world, Kep1er's original Queendom song. The mini-album will be released on January 15th, 2023. I changed the date to account for the fact that I switched the order and importance of their albums, and to avoid clash with their debut date. The 3 added tracks bulk the album out, and I removed the Wadada remix that was originally released with I Do Do You, because I don't think anyone wanted that, and I don't think people even remember it exists. Let's talk about the music video for I Do Do You. I think it's great in our current timeline. It's got a solid internal standalone story, and it follows all of the emotions it needs to. It has humour, drama, questionable ethics, sadness, anger, romance, and so on. A stellar music video that was really wasted on a 3-song release. Because of this, I don't plan to change much about the music video except to integrate the new storyline. In Giddy, Kep1er have fallen in love with a man, the man from I Do Do You, whose diary they find. They are already supernatural aliens who are disguised as humans, and they have a superhero or anime magical girl aspect as they protect Sola's dreams. The music video for I Do Do You will pick up from the end of Giddy when they find the diary, and will, the same as in our timeline, show the girls swooning over him and being convinced that he is in love with them, as well as doing shenanigans like breaking into the clothing store, only this time, for that, they will use their powers to do so. At the end of the music video, when they find out that actually he liked someone else all along, just like Yeso in our timeline, they will go crazy. They'll let out their anger in an outburst of power, and in the end, Yeso, our embodiment of love, is so enraged that she slaps him. But since she's so angry, she loses control of her powers, and instead of slapping him, she teleports him in such a violent way that he just falls down in pieces with parts of his body missing. She has literally murdered him in her rage. His suit is soaked, not with blood, not the least of which because we probably can't show blood in a K-pop music video to that extent, but with dark ink. Obviously, Yeso and the other girls are horrified, especially Yoojin, who probably thinks that her amplifying everyone's emotions on accident could have led to Yeso's extreme rage. Right as the music video ends, Chaehyun becomes the focus, as she stares at the man's empty suit in horror. A zoom in on her eye shows her vision, but instead of seeing a vision, as we know we should, we've had examples of her visions before, all we see is darkness as a little musical motif from the girls' plays. Probably the Can't Turn Me Down part, which I would sing if I could sing. Isn't that lovely? So then Kep1er will have a tad of a hiatus before they release their 4th Korean mini-album on March 10th, although it will be preceded by a pre-release track on February 20th. That's right, we're back at the pre-release dual title track game again. But seriously, it's a good marketing strategy. Don't blame me, blame the K-pop industry. But on a more serious note, if you aren't a fan of title tracks, you could realistically remove the dual title tracks from most of the previous albums I've mentioned. Le Voyage could be on its own, Back to the City could be on its own. That wouldn't be a huge issue. But this album, you can't. It is absolutely essential to Kep1er's storyline that this album has 2 title tracks, 2 music videos, 2 promotional periods, 2 everything. Let me explain. This album I have renamed to Magic Hour. Confusing, I know, but seriously it makes sense. This album will have 7 tracks, kicked off with a conceptual intro Magic Hour, which will involve a unique atmospheric instrumental, somewhat horror-like, and a spoken portion, like our interlude for their debut album. The intro, voiced by Bahie of course, but this time also including Chaehyun, will describe the process of arriving at the crossroads and the many directions life could take you. It will also incorporate the concept of the butterfly effect, that one small choice you make now could have a huge impact on your future. Finally, both in the spoken audio and in the musicality/atmosphere, it will incorporate a sense of growing dread, the idea that the wrong decision has been made, probably with like a fade out of music and an increase of just like reverberation sounds, white noise, creepy horror stuff, all of that. This leads nicely into the rest of the album, which has been reworked for more of a sinister concept. Our second track is The Girls. I've removed the name The Girls since it's only in relation to Girls' Generation's The Boys, so we're just calling it Can't Turn Me Down here. This would be the first time Solar encountered this track in this timeline. Since Kep1er didn't take part in Queendom, they didn't release a Queendom original song. Can't Turn Me Down will be a pre-release title track that will come with a music video I'll discuss later. For now, just know that this song, and most of the songs on the album, will need to have slight lyric adjustments to reflect the storyline. For instance, the original version of The Girls has the girls talking about how they're in a jungle they're not afraid of. And in this version, they will literally crush their way through said jungle with force. Not confidence, force. I'll elaborate later, but the lyrics for this song should become almost concerning in how overconfident they are. All positive implications of this song should be removed or at least lessened to an extreme degree. I also moved this song to second on the album, just after the intro to reflect the storyline, which will also be explained later. In contrast, our next song is our second title track, We Fresh. We Fresh will maintain most of its positivity. It is important that this song represents the light to the dark of Can't Turn Me Down. Hence why it's important that the album has 2 title tracks. We Fresh will be the title track released with the album, and of course we'll get a music video, and it would be fun to include a lot of magical girl references as opposed to superhero ones. Then we have the usual suspects. Our timeline's 3 B-sides of Lion Tamer, Downtown, and Dreams. The only one that should maintain positive implications is Dreams. The other 2 should be reworked to not entirely destroy any positivity, but to definitely have a darker tone and to consider the darker implications of the butterfly effect. For instance, really emphasizing the concept of Kep1er hunting a potential love interest in Lion Tamer, rather than just taming them. Think of the lyrics of Ives' Hey Ya, but with even more emphasis on the hunting. Finally, we'll have an outro, Snake, Kep1er's version. The seductive and dark concept of Snake works well with this album, and with a small lyrical rework can represent them falling prey to their darker sides and abusing their powers to hunt someone down. This is when I circle back to the title. Magic Hour is positive when associated with Kep1er in our timeline since, well, Galileo is a cute song and the album is literally pink with a flower on it. But Magic Hour is a relatively neutral term in the real world, and this album, by pairing it with a darker concept and lyrics, portrays the opposite side of that phrase. An overwhelming and malicious type of magic, not a nice and lovely one. Now, let's talk music videos. Can't Turn Me Down will begin with Chaehyun's vision from the end of I Do Do You. We see the darkness, and over time it becomes obvious that the darkness isn't just the lack of a vision, it is the vision itself. All Chaehyun can see is darkness. Cue the title page. The bulk of the music video will be Kep1er returning home to their little house. Their mood is so low it's practically in hell. Even though Yujin and Mashiro try to use their powers to cheer the others up, it doesn't work, and even those 2 are so concerned it's hard for them to muster the power they really need. This all needs to be communicated with facial expressions and body language, so it's a good chance for them to show off their acting skills, especially considering the possibility of Yujin becoming an actress after Kep1er. Anyway, Yeso is crying, Xiaoting looks super serious and bummed out, and Chaehyun looks well and truly traumatized. Bahie watches her, concerned, and when they get home, she stays outside, pulling out her grimoire and a piece of fabric, part of the man's suit from the end of I Do Do You. Comparing the darkness she set aside from La Voyage and Sugar Rush on her grimoire with the darkness on the man's suit, they are identical, and she bursts in on the other girls to show them this information. Suddenly, they see darkness everywhere. Xiaoting's crystals are covered in it, the plant Mashiro looks after is too, and Hikaru's radio equipment is clogged up with darkness. Youngin tries to blast it away and ends up producing more darkness than actual light. Yeso tries to teleport it away the same way she did last time and it multiplies instead, so on and so forth. Obviously the girls are horrified. With darkness crawling all over the cover of her grimoire, Bahie opens it and looks at the memories she has stored. We see on its pages the many times the girls abused their powers, showing off for a man who didn't actually care about them, using their powers in public where they could be discovered, using them to take out their anger on the man from I Do Do You, or for convenience. The memories are eventually swallowed by the darkness that covers the pages, and Bahie drops the book in a panic. The girls get a moment to stare at each other before the whole house shakes. They run outside to look and see a massive glob of darkness flying out of the forest at them. Dion blasts it with her powers in self-defense and it splits into tiny pieces before coming together to form a massive black hole, which dwarfs the members and their house from the sky. Chaehyun gets another vision. Through the black hole she sees a flash of many things. Crossroads, a butterfly, the silhouette of one of the members impaled on a spike, Xiaoting's crystals shattering, their house being destroyed, those kinds of things. The whole montage lasts less than 5 seconds and the whole thing is in black and white, completely devoid of colour. The final image we get, which leaves an after image it's so strong, is what is clearly an alternate version of Chaehyun, her space headdress broken and dripping darkness, and her eyes completely black, grinning wickedly. This will all go on, obviously, at the end of the song, And for dramatic effect, I think we should have Chaehyun, normal Chaehyun, collapse in shock on the last Can't Turn Me Down. Cue the other members rushing in to check if she's okay while the darkness of the black hole looms over them in the sky. So, I would expect this would keep the fans hyped long enough that a good chunk of them and the general public would tune in to watch the follow-up music video for We Fresh. Before we discuss We Fresh, let me give you a little context/elaboration. This Kep1er is well and truly a space concept group, and what better villain for a space concept group whose goal is to bring colour into the world than a literal black hole? However, this black hole isn't just a black hole, it's more of a symbol. It even could be represented with drawing rotoscope as opposed to expensive CGI if it needs to be. It's a symbol, not an actual thing. Through their abuse of their powers, Kep1er have torn a hole in the universe and have opened up many different paths for themselves, hence the crossroads and the butterfly effect. They now have two main options: continue to abuse their powers and become the worst versions of themselves, literally lost to the darkness, or fight the darkness inside themselves and continue to protect Solar, whose light can't exist inside of the black hole. These versions of Kep1er aren't necessarily alternate universes, they are more like two alternate future selves. Although this naming system would greatly simplify what I hope would create depth in the story, we can potentially call them good Kep1er and bad Kep1er for the sake of giving them names. Again, it's simplifying, but it makes sense. This music video would be the payoff for all the weird end credit scenes and other details in the other music videos, and it would give the group an interesting way to go. Although other groups have done a good versus evil version of themselves concept, I think the addition of the powers and space concept and the potential destruction of the universe itself is something that is underexplored. The only example I can think of off the top of my head is something that is only barely implied in ATEEZ's storyline, and even then I think they may have retconned it. Another advantage of the alternate future selves is that they provide instant drama and emotional tension, which is important since as a 2.5-year group we can't afford to build up to it for much longer. Kep1er need a complete story, and this is one of the steps we'll take to meeting that goal. As a final note, I think it would be really cool if, for stage outfits, for both Can't Turn Me Down and We Fresh promotions, Kep1er alternated between performing as the monochrome, quote, evil versions of themselves, the colourful magical girl good versions, and their current selves. It would completely change the vibes of the stage and would aid their storytelling. As their current selves, it represents possible pathways they could take. As their evil selves, it is the worst case scenario, and as their magical girl hero selves, they are actively fighting against the corruption of the darkness. It also nicely gives us 3 outfits we can use for storytelling, 3 outfits being the quota for most K-pop music videos. So let's talk about that fight with We Fresh. The music video for We Fresh would be relatively similar in pacing to our timeline, only this timeline, instead of random shooting and other superhero activities, Kep1er fight the darkness and are more magical girl inspired. I've mentioned it several times by now, but with a space concept, Kep1er suit magical girls far more than superheroes. Hence, here we will alter the superhero concept to be more of a magical girl concept. The music video will feature things similar to the ones we have right now. Instead of Kep1er being happily together in the intro, they'll be in Hikaru's office, planning their attack against the darkness. With their call to action, they're ready to go. Some members will be sneaking around to try and attack the pieces of darkness which have formed around the world. Hikaru will be directing the offensive, and Bahie, Xiaoting and Mashiro will be creating weapons to use against the darkness. In this case, Xiaoting's crystals will be charged to attempt to absorb it, and Bahie's grimoire will have pages torn out and infused with magic to try and do the same. They can experiment on pieces of darkness they see in the house. This will both, 1, communicate what they're trying to do to the audience and thus that they're trying to absorb the darkness, and 2, show that it works on smaller pieces of darkness, thus the implication being that it could work on the larger black hole as well. Chaehyun is having visions about where the darkness may show up next, aka which areas of the world it would attack and which places are most dear to Solar, and she relays this to Hikaru, who communicates it with the other members via her telepathy. This setup leaves Yujin, Youngin, and Daeon as our offensive team, with Yeso teleporting them to places where the darkness has fallen. It's important to note something here. The darkness is a massive threat, yes, but it isn't immediate. It isn't bearing down on them trying to murder them, but it does pose an inevitable possibility, and it will slowly engulf their lives, the lives of Solar, and the lives of everyone else on the planet if they don't get rid of it, and most importantly, the two suns that it is growing closer and closer to. By the time the offensive is fully underway, Bahie, Mashiro, and Zhaoting have joined the offensive on the ground. Once we've reached this point, we will get the main action of the music video. The darkness is evolving as they fight it. It has turned into figures made entirely of darkness who literally fight the girls. By that I mean hand-to-hand combat, or superpowered battles, depending on who it is. For instance, Chaehyun, Hikaru, Yujin, and Bahie don't have powers that could be used for combat, hence hand-to-hand for them. Youngin, Daeon, Yeso, and Zhaoting have powers that could potentially be used in combat, so they will fight with them. Mashiro will use a combination since her powers wouldn't have a big enough effect to directly fight, but could be used as a distraction or to heal her burns as she goes and stuff like that. We Fresh is an upbeat song and an action-filled music video, and we'll keep it that way. Just this time, instead of being superheroes, they're fighting with the darkness people. Hikaru and Chaehyun are ambushed in the control room, just for the fun of them getting involved. Now, an important thing I want here is that since they're fight scenes, of course there will be lots of fast cuts and shots, and we can do two things with that. First, obviously, create a sense of action and confusion, as the middle of a fight would be. Second is important. In flashes, the girls are no longer fighting the darkness people, but their darker selves. For an example of this in a K-pop music video, I would suggest the end of ATEEZ's Say My Name, or Sejong's Top or Cliff. We need to kind of combine these. In my opinion, the fighting yourself concept is well expressed in Say My Name, but the actual fighting, not so much. Sejong's gets the fighting down, but the shots are too quick and it can take many watches to even realise that she's fighting herself. We need to find a happy middle ground with We Fresh. Either way, at the end of the music video, the members of the group will be broken and beaten. In PG, of course, guys. Chaehyun will be the worst affected. The number of visions she's had as she's been fighting have clearly been debilitating over the course of the music video, to the point she was barely able to lift a hand against her attacker. Right at the end, not as a vision, but through Chaehyun's just general perspective as she looks out the window at the black hole, we see the 9 members of evil Kep1er staring down at her in triumph. It is very clear that Kep1er, despite immaculate planning and teamwork, have lost this round. And on that lovely note, Kep1er go to KCON in Thailand, Japan, and LA, and a bunch of other festivals around the world in the period from late March to early August 2023. They'll get plenty of chances to showcase their new songs and to keep fans guessing about what happens next. Maybe they have an interview about their storyline or something and Chaehyun makes some vague remark. If there's one thing that keeps people coming back, it's cliffhangers, and this would be a great one. Now, I will make a note here. You may feel the stories shown in these music videos don't suit the songs or don't suit the pacing of them, would be in a better order, whatever. Maybe you think that Can't Turn Me Down is a stronger song and thus should be released with the album, with We Fresh as a pre-release. And yeah, I can see it in multiple ways. We have 2 sets of 2 options here. We can release either We Fresh or Can't Turn Me Down first, and we can switch the storylines between the 2 music videos, which will potentially make a non-linear storyline where we see the fight with the darkness people first and the black hole appearing second. Anything works and either scene/music video concept could go with either of the 2 songs, but here I've shown what I think is the best option. Towards the end of September 2023, after a bit of a break, Kep1er come back with their 5th Korean mini-album, The Key. To help keep their fans hyped and to bridge the gap between this album and the previous one, there is also the option to release special performance videos of the 2 unit songs, Tropical Light and Tape, in advance. And no, there is no pre-release or dual title track this time. Let's give them a break. The album will be released on September 21st. I've changed this date from when Magic Hour was initially released to attempt to avoid a clash with IVE and New Jeans' comebacks, and to attempt to let them promote it more. Kep1er need to be in Poland to perform at K-pop Nation Poland on September 23rd, but since the majority of comeback materials, like comeback stages, can be recorded in advance, I think this is okay. Worst comes to worst, we can either 1. Push the album forward to the start of September, or 2. Kep1er just don't go to K-pop Nation Poland. Sorry, Polish people, you don't get to see Kep1er. Anyway, the album. I changed the title to reflect the storyline. The track list will be in order. The Door, Love on Lock, Galileo, the title track, Tropical Light, Tape, and a conceptual outro, Memories, which will sample from Straight Line. This album is one of the very few in Kep1er's discography, in fact it might be the only one of their Korean albums in which the title track was actually the track that probably should have been the title track. I mean, maybe Love on Lock would be better, but I just don't see that much hype around it compared to Galileo. I think this album was pretty good, all things considered. The biggest issue was that it wasn't promoted until like 2 months after it was released, so all the hype had died by that time and they had literally no chance to make it memorable at all. 2 ways to make it less forgettable would be to integrate it into the storyline and thus to help it lead into the next section of their story, the final arc as such. And guess what? The cliffhanger from Magic Hour and We Fresh would keep more people interested, and they would want to tune into this album to see the follow-up. So, Galileo. Xiaoting and Bahie are the stars of this one. We'll stick with the concept of a museum and a museum curator, kind of, and this time, since Bahie protects the memories of the team, she is the curator, while Xiaoting's magical experience as the eldest alien provides wisdom. But before we get there, we need to remind ourselves of the end of We Fresh. The music video will begin with Yeso barely managing to teleport everyone back to their battered home, where they start to pull themselves back together. The black hole looms. Through their telescope, they can see it in the sky, a little bit too small for humans to see, but still growing. Soon it will dwarf the 2 suns and will swallow them. At the edge of dozing off, exhausted, Hikaru notices a blob of darkness on the floor growing in size, which of course makes her very fearful. This also gives us a good opportunity to subvert the lyrics of the song, and overlay Hikaru and the darkness looking at each other with Yeso's "when I'm looking at you and you're looking at me" line at the start of the song. Kind of comedic but also kind of sinister. This music video should be more light-hearted than the previous 2, and the quirky nature of Galileo as a song, combined with a more humorous music video, should do the job. Anyway, as Hikaru is staring at this piece of darkness, we see it shrinks away. Other shots reveal that Dion has laughed at a joke that Yujin made to her while disinfecting her wounds. This is important because it visually communicates how joy and other positive emotions can be used against the darkness. The darkness is a representation of, well, darkness and dark emotions. It's not subtle, but it doesn't need to be either. The black hole will consume everything positive in the world, and the way to combat it and to protect Solar is to present it with more positive emotions, which is Kep1er's job here. Anyway, Hikaru smiles at this sudden discovery, and her smile makes the darkness further shrink away until it disappears. Cut to the main portion of the music video. The 9 members entering Bahie's grimoire, basically entering the dream world in which she stores their memories. The memories of each Japanese and Korean music video they've released so far will be present here, and the members, either as pairs or just by themselves, will enter each memory and extract the essence of it, the essence of happy memories to be specific. So for instance, We Fresh and Can't Turn Me Down may seem difficult. They were pretty dark music videos. But in We Fresh, happiness can be taken from a joke shared between Bahie, Mashiro and Xiaoting while experimenting with the darkness, or from between Hikaru and Chaehyun, and, probably the best option, from the joy the 4 members of the ground offensive team feel when they obliterate one of the pieces of darkness that has fallen to Earth. The joy from Can't Turn Me Down can come from objects that are important to the members. For instance, Xiaoting's crystals. or can come from the act of the members being together and comforting each other at the start of the music video. Either way, the members are travelling to their past music videos and collecting the essence of happy memories in bottles, which have been specially put together by Mashiro. Right at the end of the music video, they'll all come together, and we'll see all of the bottles collected together, accompanied by Chaehyun's vision of a possible joyful future, full of colour, where Kep1er can be with Solar, perhaps like a concert shot or something, you know. After this, Kep1er have the aforementioned K-pop Nation Poland performance, and I will switch their Japanese and Korean fan meet dates, so the Korean fan meet ends up on Halloween, my favourite day. Their Japanese fan meet Fantasia will run on October 21st and 22nd, and their Korean one, Kep1er's Strange Market, will run on October 30th and 31st, with the Strange Market on the 31st being live-streamed worldwide for extra cash, of course. It's important for the fan meet to be on Halloween since it's the anniversary of the release of Butterfly Effect, the purpose of which was to lead to the possibility of two futures, which we now have. And since, well, now Kep1er have a tinge of horror in their story, so it's very thematic. I love Kep1er's Strange Market in our current timeline, and I want it to be pretty similar. The story of this fan meet through the VCRs will include the regular things from our timeline. Bahie's voiceover, the fact that the Strange Market is partially located inside her grimoire, Kep1er advertising the many services they can give to Solar, etc. I'll only change a few things. First, adding demonstrations of their powers, which can be used to further advertise the many services, strange services more like, that they provide. Imagine getting Hikaru to send a psychic message to your loved ones around the world, or to fry the brain of someone you hate, for instance. Second, we'll further their storyline towards the end. Instead of the section where they all enter the past album's universes, the footage for which would have been used in Galileo's music video, we'll see the portal out of Bahie's grimoire, with the voiceover saying something along the lines of how they can collect anything you need from the past, or something like that, more poetic. Dion comes out of the portal and brings the final jar of happy memory essence, or whatever you want to call it, to Mashiro and Xiaoting, who are in the lab. The three of them work on synthesizing the many jars together, and in the end they create a single arrow, which will of course look funky, magical and majestic, and will have a hollow crystal tip which will be filled with the many memories. It will basically look like a rainbow liquid swirling around, for those of you who want a visual idea. This arrow is the culmination of their efforts and will be their final weapon against the black hole. After this, Kep1er will release their first full Japanese album at the end of December, again returning to dual title tracks. The pre-release track Grand Prix will be released on the 15th of December, and the full album and second title track Straight Line will be released on December 27th, 2023. I've changed the name of the album to Power Up to reflect the fact that, with their new arrow, they have literally powered up and gained a new way to fight against the black hole. This line also helped connect Grand Prix to the storyline, since without Queendom, the sudden racetrack concept seems a bit weird, and Grand Prix emphasises the line Power Up in the chorus. I've also moved the album release date forward to Kep1er's birthday in 2023. Whether or not December 27th ended up being Kep1er's debut date, this would be symbolic. I've also moved it forward to help my rework of their timeline. You'll see why in the future. This means that I have also merged the Grand Prix album with the Keep On Going one, since I found it a bit odd for them to have two Japanese comebacks one after each other, and moving Keep On Going forward would leave it to be released right on top of Grand Prix. This album consists of 20 songs, 7 of which will be new as in our timeline. I think it would be better to advertise this as a compilation album rather than a full album, since it only adds a few new tracks, and is mostly just a compilation of their past Japanese and Japanese version Korean title tracks. Here are the tracks in order. Note that I have added the new Korean title tracks, and that I've changed the order a bit to add nostalgia at the end, since this is their last Japanese release, and to give a rough image of chronology over their career. For instance, Wadada will be coming before We Fresh. The tracks will go as follows: Wing Wing, Grand Prix, the first title track and with a pre-release music video, The Japanese versions of Wadada, Mask, Up, La Voyage, Giddy and Back to the City, I Do Do You, the unit songs Celebrate, Highlight and Cruise, then the Japanese versions of Can't Turn Me Down, We Fresh and Galileo, followed by Sugar, Don't Lose Your Smile, Daisy, Together Forever and our second title track, Straight Line. Grand Prix will have some small lyrical changes to reflect the idea that Kep1er are running towards Solar to protect them from the darkness, and the fact that they are now filled with adrenaline at the possibility of finally defeating it. The music video will reflect these lyrical changes and storyline changes, although it will kind of keep the theme of racing through like the racing stripes on their clothes, etc. Since Kep1er are racing towards their goal, it will show the contrast between their new confidence and the possibility of a bad future. We will have a moment where every member falters and thinks of the possibility that they can be overtaken by the darkness, represented by phantom darkness attaching itself to their hands and legs and so on. It will be less story-based, as in it won't advance the storyline, but it will illustrate the concepts of their story, the darkness and the possibilities for the two futures, which will be overwhelmed at the end of the music video by positive memories and the possibility for dreams. We can highlight Yujin and Mashiro encouraging the members here and bringing them all together. The music video for Straight Line will be the members getting ready for their final battle, literally suiting up, training, etc. They have the weapon they need, and now they're on the straight line towards their goal, defeating the black hole. We'll get all the cool shots of them training their powers, working together, synthesizing and putting on armor, etc. And Chaehyun will be training with a special bow to shoot the arrow well. We'll see her getting better over the course of the music video. And, of course, cool glamour shots of them moving forward. Kep1er will be performing, as we would expect, at Mama and other award shows, and we want a storyline-based performance for them, like last year. Mama is the main one, so it's where we put in the most effort. At Mama 2023, Kep1er will perform 3 songs: Can't Turn Me Down, We Fresh, and their pre-release Grand Prix. This will demonstrate their storyline well, will be high energy, and will show their popularity in both Korea and Japan. Keep in mind that Mama's usually around the start of December, so it will have happened before their actual album comes out. They'll come out looking glamorous, etc. as the VCR plays. A VCR which describes in a cartoony storybook fashion how the aliens came to Earth to protect the dreams of their fans, but caught up in a new world, they abused their power and opened a hole in the universe. Hence, non-fans who are watching are introduced to the rough storyline. Kep1er will perform Can't Turn Me Down in dark outfits which represent their darker selves, and the black hole will take up the screens behind them. After Can't Turn Me Down, they'll rip off these elegant gowns and throw away their broken celestial crowns, revealing award show glammed up versions of their magical girl superhero outfits from We Fresh. They'll have a fight scene with the backup dancers, similar to their actual Grand Prix Mama performance in 2023, however this time we'll pick our backup dancers and their styling carefully. So they're not fighting male thugs, they're fighting the dark versions of themselves, basically the outfits they just shed. Since the actual members have to win and the backup dancers can't, in the end, quote, good Kep1er will win. Hence they perform We Fresh, and after We Fresh we get a dance break where the members perform short dances in groups based on their past music videos, coming together under the symbol of the arrow when they're done. Think IZ*ONE's Mama performance intro for Secret Story of the Swan. And at the end they all come together where they go straight into the final chorus of Grand Prix. And that's it, that's Kep1er's last Mama performance before they disband. Other award shows can be performed at by either, quote, good or, quote, evil Kep1er, and can include similar VCRs and dance breaks depending on the amount of effort Wake One decides to put in, which knowing them is probably none. They'll perform a rotation of songs: Can't Turn Me Down, Grand Prix, Tropical Light and Tape, Galileo and We Fresh. After all of that, Kep1er will release their first Korean full album, Final Flight, on February 15th, 2024. I've moved the date of the album forward. Now it is Galileo's birthday and potentially their second debut anniversary. I think a great way to mark them no longer being considered rookies would be to release their first full Korean album. This also allows time for a special something later in their careers, which again I will discuss later. This earlier date also means that 1. There is a shorter gap between Korean albums, the gap for which was 9 months in our timeline, and 2. They get to avoid IVE's comeback. This date does clash with LE SSERAFIM's comeback with Easy, but I don't think that will be too much of an issue. LE SSERAFIM had already been criticised a lot for vocals and other things before this release. Perfect Night was criticised and also led to kind of a lull for them, and I don't think they're nearly as threatening to Kep1er as IVE are anyway. Sure, Wake One wouldn't know that LE SSERAFIM would get a lot of hate for this comeback, but like I said, they're less threatening than IVE, so we'll pick the better option. This album structure will be exactly the same as in our timeline. The title track Shooting Star and the album order going: intro, Last Carnival, followed by Shooting Star, Curious, Flowers Flutter Your Heart, Double Up, Push Button, Problem, Dear Diary, and the Korean versions of Grand Prix and Straight Line. At the end, for the sake of career consistency and nostalgia, I'll add an outro called Final Breath, which will be a remix mashup of the instrumentals from each of their Korean and Japanese title tracks. Now let's talk about the music video. The music video for Shooting Star will begin with the members suited up and ready for battle. Chaehyun is their main hope. She is the one with the bow and the one with the arrow. The black hole has grown large enough that the two suns are barely visible behind it, and it has started to descend towards Earth. The black hole has started to release tendrils which suck up everything in their path. For an image of the kind of chaos I want in this section of the music video, you can think of aespa's supernova, but instead of a tempest, it's, well, a black hole. At this point, gravity is starting to go all funny. The hole is sucking things up, etc., etc. Darkness people are also swarming around. How lovely. The tone at this point in the music video should be very apocalyptic. Anyway, the 9 members move towards the hole, waiting for Chaehyun to come into range. On the way, they encounter a good number of the darkness people and the moving tendrils, but they manage to shove them aside, either destroying them and making them just kind of dissipate into the wind with swords and their powers, doing the equivalent of whatever knocking out a person made of darkness would be, absorbing them with Xiaoting's crystals and Bahie's enchanted papers, Yeso teleporting them away, etc. But as they get closer, as you would expect, it becomes harder to go through everything, and the colour starts to be sapped from the world, which becomes less saturated. And when Chaehyun, desperate to end the encounter as soon as possible, draws her bow, before she can shoot, it gets knocked out of her hand, as Hikaru is thrown into her by one of the tendrils. The arrow goes flying, Chaehyun and Hikaru go sprawling on the ground, and the members are generally subdued by the combination of the darkness people and the tendrils holding them down. The black hole is starting to suck the heat from the two suns, and the souls from the members. Chaehyun struggles to get up but is suddenly debilitated by a vision, and through the eyes of her vision we see the members on the ground flickering between their normal selves and being their dark future selves. Dark Hikaru's hand reaches for Chaehyun's head, with sharp nails like claws which look like they'll crush her skull, while Dion's electricity crackles around the arrow, breaking it. Hikaru's hand reaches Chaehyun's head and instead of crushing her skull, grips her chin sharply. Suddenly we, or Chaehyun, are back in the real world. Hikaru has used her powers to snap Chaehyun out of the vision, and Dion isn't destroying the arrow, she's using her powers to blast it towards Chaehyun. Chaehyun reaches out and only just manages to grab it, of course for the drama, and with Hikaru's hand now on her shoulder and with a clear mind, she takes aim and shoots. We see the arrow fly and nicely go right into the center of the black hole. Exhausted, Hikaru, Dion, and Chaehyun collapse. But looking up, Chaehyun can see that the black hole is still there. The two suns have almost entirely lost their light. Did the arrow not work after all of that? But it did work. Slowly, parts of the black hole seem to kind of dilute. Moving out from the center, portions of the hole become mottled. No longer just blackness and darkness, but also full of light and color, as color returns to the world. The infection, as such, travels outwards, rippling towards the edges of the black hole, and pieces of light shed off it, flying around like pieces of shrapnel. Every time one of the pieces hits a dark tendril or dark person, they dissolve and explode into little firework-like puffs of colour. Finally, with a great tremble, the black hole explodes into a full aurora, sending a wave of colour outwards, far more vibrant than usual before it recovers to normal. The members struggle to their feet and go to Chaehyun and Hikaru full of smiles. The two suns are bright and warm again in the sky, and through the eyes of Chaehyun's vision we see them merge and become one large violet sun, surrounded by the colours of the aurora. The final shots of the music video are the members looking up at the currently two suns together, clearly battered but proud of themselves. A closer shot shows Chaehyun's face. She is the only one who can see the single sun, which is reflected in her eye, and she looks up at it. Tears flow freely down her face, but she is smiling. A nice dramatic end to the story, and hopefully one that fans would find emotional and cathartic. Interestingly, I wrote this music video story before Keep On Going was actually released, and Shooting Star conceptually and sonically fit my idea very well considering I wrote this before it came out. Even the timing of the song would fit what I wrote very well. So either this was just an obvious musical structure for a disbandment song, or some random Wake1 producer and I are soulmates. Wake1, please hire me, I want to direct K-pop music videos.
첫 느낌 그대로 안아줘 끝까지 너라면 더는 겁낼 게 없거든 어둠 속에 온몸을 던져 지지 않는 저 별처럼
So after the release of that album, Kep1er would have about 6 months left in their career. And what better way to end it all off than a world tour? Fans have been begging for a Kep1er world tour since the beginning of their careers, and the only two arguments people have had against it was that, one, they're more popular in Japan, so why don't they just cater to a Japanese audience? And two, IZ*ONE never had a global tour. Yeah, but just because IZ*ONE didn't do something doesn't mean Kep1er shouldn't. Also, IZ*ONE had the end of their careers during COVID. It's not like they could have done a world tour no matter how much they potentially wanted to or even planned to. They did do an Asian tour, which Kep1er didn't do. Also, if my plan for the group works well, they should be uber popular everywhere, not just in Japan. Anyway, we can tell from their Spotify numbers and from other common sense metrics that Kep1er have a large overseas audience. I mean, Bahia got votes in over 100 countries, and sure, each country could only be a small number of votes, but those are people who were interested in her, and that suggests at least some kind of global popularity, and that's only one member of this group. Needless to say, they may not be ATEEZ or Stray Kids, but they definitely have an international fandom that they could take advantage of, and, more importantly for Wake1, milk money out of. So my plan is Kep1er have a world tour, starting in Japan at the start of March, moving through Asia, perhaps 1 or 2 stops in Oceania, let's be honest, probably in Australia, and then on to Europe and America. I'm unsure if they have enough fans in Africa and South America to warrant stops there, but I'm sure Wake1 would have data on where their album sales are coming from, which would direct the tour. Album sales mean that people are not only fans of the group, but are also willing to spend money on them, and would therefore be a better indication of concert numbers than something like Spotify listeners or Girls Planet voters. It definitely wouldn't be 100% accurate, but nothing ever is until you try it, right? Kep1er will finish up this world tour with several concerts in Korea, with the final concert being on their disbandment date, which in this timeline will be July 20th, 2024. The final concert will be live streamed around the world, another way to bring in money from international fans, but which also allows them to be involved in this final moment of Kep1er's career. At this final concert, the group will perform some new songs, which will simultaneously be released as their final album on streaming platforms. This will be their second full Korean album and will be called New Dreams. The music video for the title track will be played at the final concert, and will feature the girls, bandaged up after the final fight with the black hole, compiling the happy memories they made with Solar in Bahie's grimoire. These memories will include clips from their music videos and reality shows, live stream moments, candid moments, and more importantly, moments spent with fans, like fan meets, concerts, and just general candid moments at places like KCON. The music video will show, in order, Kep1er's full journey, from Girls Planet footage to their current world tour, and is bound to make more than a few fans cry. At the end of their music videos, the girls, still bearing the casts, bandages, and so on from their battle injuries, and wearing their celestial crowns, sit around a picnic mat in their backyard, and look up at the two suns, which, as in Chaehyun's vision, now in the real world, come together to form one sun. This represents that Kep1er and Solar have come together and that their dreams will be one forever. This album will be Kep1er's final farewell album, and it needs to be a very special farewell to a very special group. The group who restarted, hopefully, the Produce dynasty. The purpose will be, first, to be nostalgic now and in the future. Second, to make the fans sad, duh. Third, to provide closure to their storyline and concept. And finally, to create an individual identity for each of the members and for the group as a whole, which will lead into the rest of their careers. Until now, Kep1er have been a group, but now they will be 9 members and they need individual identities and qualifications. To aid this, each of the members will have their own solo song on the album, and they will help make these songs, whether that be by composing and producing, lyricism, choreography, playing instruments for the backtrack, or something else. These songs will be on the album in order of debut rank, culminating in the final song, the title track Eternity, which acts as a send-off to their career as a group. Now, obviously, unlike every other album I've discussed here, there is no actual disbandment album with a song for each member, so I can't direct you to a song for each one, but I can describe the ideas I had. Obviously, were this to happen in the real world, the members may decide to make something completely different for themselves, and my guesses as to what they might want could be completely off. But I have to show something for this album, hence my ideas. And you may say, but Casper, not only did no other produce group do this, but that's 10 new songs you have to make. That's a lot of time and money. Or maybe you wouldn't say that. But either way, as I said before, Kep1er aren't technically a produce group, and they don't technically need to follow produce rules or standards. But also, Wakeone likely has tons of partial songs jangling around on a USB somewhere, since we know songs are made and planned sometimes even years in advance. It would likely not be that hard, in the scheme of things, to produce a song per member, especially if they went the low-effort route with it, which we would obviously hope they wouldn't do, but they probably would realistically. Also, with the members contributing, it would be easier on the company, as in you don't need to pay an extra person, use your free labour while you can. Now let's discuss the songs. First, Aurora by Chaehyun, a soulful ballad with a climactic high note ending showing off her vocal skills and range, and expressing how she's overcome her insecurities. The song name comes from her being the bright, colourful centre of Kep1er. Second, Bahie's song Memories. This will be a toned down and lower pitched pop genre love song about her love for the members and the fans, and will contrast Chaehyun's higher pitched voice. The song is named for her role in the storyline as a memory keeper. Third, Yujin's song Bright Light. This will be an elegant song, potentially with an elegant choreography too. about her love for performing, something she has shown time and time again, especially on Girls' Planet. The song is named for the bright future she will no doubt have, and I imagine it sonically being a bit like Mask or La Voyage. Fourth, Shining by Dion, an upbeat dance song inspired by her performance of pop stars on Girls' Planet, which lets her show off her dance, vocal, and rap skills all at once, and show how cool she is. The song is named for her ability to shine in all roles. Fifth, Tiger by Youngin, a song with a lot of duality, like NMIXX or SHINee's songs or TXT's Eternally. Thematically, it can show a conflict between her nostalgia for the past and hopes for the future. It will showcase her performance prowess and duality, and I named it after what is probably my favourite Youngin line from the start of Can't Turn Me Down, which also expresses the fierceness of her performance. Sixth, New Love Story by Yeso. This will be more of an upbeat ballad with pop elements which has a mellow ending. When Kep1er disband, Yeso will be 18 and have many opportunities ahead of her, whether they be in the idol industry, acting, or elsewhere. I want this song to show the depth of her acting skills and to express both hope for the future and sadness for the group's disbandment, through the metaphor of falling out of love with someone or having a bad relationship and then falling in love with a new person. Seventh, Hikaru's song Cosmic Connection. This is when we get into the international members, and I think it would be really cool if those members incorporated their native languages. So I imagine Cosmic Connection being a dance and rap song with a hip-hop element, and Japanese and Korean language blended together. I imagine it having some inspiration from Kep1er's tape. The song should let her show off how cool she is, and could even let her show off her vocals too. It will be named for her role in the group, being a literal connector, while the cosmic portion comes from their space and alien concept. Eighth, Mashiro's Journey. This would be a ballad also including Japanese portions. I'm thinking a mix between songs like La Voyage and more passionate ballad-type songs like ATEEZ's Turbulence. Ninth, Xiaoting's song Goddess. I think this should be something which is sonically and visually stunning and spectacular, like her Snake Mama stage. It would show off her role as a visual, but also as a dancer and vocalist, and could even incorporate her ballroom dancing skills. It would possibly be more mature and seductive, but could also just be regularly elegant. It could also be either entirely or partially in Chinese. Kep1er were supposed to be a global group, and the show was made up of 1/3 Chinese members, yet Kep1er never released a single Chinese song. I understand that there are limitations on idol activity in China, and that Japan is a larger market who were also more interested in Kep1er, but Xiaoting was the only Chinese member of the group, and had no one to talk to in her native language, other than Bahia's probably very broken Chinese from her childhood. She was constantly shoved to the side over Kep1er's career, met with racist hate from antis and OT8s alike, and was just generally criticised for everything she got and everything she did. She probably saw her parents only once or twice, if at all, over the course of Kep1er's career, and only had a handful of activities in China. And on top of that, Kep1er never released a Chinese song, and probably wouldn't have done so even if the entire group had been Chinese trainees. Let's just say Xiaoting didn't have an easy time of it, and she deserves to be able to sing in her native language. This would also technically give Kep1er one Chinese song, which is next to nothing, but it's something at least. Finally, the 10th track, the title track Eternity, which I described earlier. And with that album introduced to fans and performed at their final concert, Kep1er will take their final bow, and by the time they leave the venue at the end of the night, they will no longer be a group, and will just be 9 trainees under their respective companies. And that is the end of their career as Kep1er. Their final concert and activity as a group will mark their disbandment, and continuing the space theme to the end, July 20th, 2024 will mark their disbandment, and it will also mark the 55th anniversary of the moon landing. Kep1er, their whole careers, have been racing towards their fans from space, literally a space race, and fitting for their concept, they will disband on the anniversary of this race ending, the day that human dreams reached as high as space itself. I need to address something here, the concern that Kep1er are overworked. And you may not like my answer, but they kind of have to be. This is a 2.5-year project group, and if they're going to have more than 4 albums released, and if they're going to have any impact on the industry, they need to produce a lot of content, and they need to have lots of comebacks, and that means they'll be overworked. Especially at the end of their careers, Kep1er will need to be overworked to ensure they have a dramatic enough conclusion to their careers. It's far from desirable, and many people would say it's inhumane, but in this industry it is what it is. If I were Wake1, I would have this plan I highlighted above to milk as much as possible out of this group. And if they decide to renew, that is when we right away release a 5-song mini album to convince the fans they aren't going anywhere, and then take a nice long break, maybe 6 to 10 months, before doing literally anything else. This should be easy to present to the fans. You just tell them that since Kep1er has worked so hard over 2.5 years to please and serve the fans, the company would like to give them a break to rest and recuperate, and they'll be taking a holiday to visit their families, and so on and so on. The fans, for the most part, will no doubt be happy that Kep1er are getting a break. And from then on, because Kep1er have longer left in their careers, we don't need to feel the need to overwork them as much, and they can settle into a more normal 2 per year comeback schedule. You may then ask, what about their concept after this? Now their story is completed, so what do we do? Well, we have 2 options. If there is a set disbandment date for Kep1er that has just been moved a few years back, we can give them a second story arc. This could be another big bad villain, it could be drama within the group, it could be time travel shenanigans and undoing the universe, it could be them finding parallel universes, etc. There's tons of possibilities you can do with a space concept, and all of them, if done well and with a few tweaks, could be unique in the industry. The second option is that instead of furthering their storyline, we just stick with their concept. Each music video and album is a standalone story, but they all stick with the concept of being superpowered alien magical girls who are enthusiastically cheering on their fans and encouraging them to chase their dreams. We have the whole keep on going, we can have tons of enthusiastic summer songs, cheering on the fans, so on, so on, so on. And now the unified sun, the aurora, etc. will stick around as representative symbols. Either option could work depending on how stable Kep1er's careers are after a potential renewal. But let's be honest, one of the goals of this rework would be to make the group so successful that they wouldn't renew. If I may direct you to my Kep1er renewal minisode, may I remind you that Kep1er renewing their contract pretty much means they failed as a group. They failed to make enough of an impact in the industry that companies wanted the members for publicity. And in my timeline, I hope they would make enough of an impact that they would be so popular that major companies would snatch up all the members, or their current companies would have plans for them, even for members who would generally be considered too old to re-debut like Xiaoting and Yujin. So, let's review our goals from the start of this video and see if we solved them. So hopefully you enjoyed that look at an alternate Kep1er career, and hopefully even if you thought some bits were a bit weird, you still agree with me that it's a better option for the group. With goal number 1, the group and fandom name, we've kind of resolved that, I think. We've addressed the more toxic parts of the fandom by removing prominent accounts or groups that hate on particular members, and by 1, reinforcing that all of the members belong in the group, and 2, giving those following the group as few things to complain about as possible. We've avoided a misallocation of positions as much as possible and removed any debates about positions by straight up assigning members and announcing them. And we've aimed to treat Chaehyun as the centre through storyline, concept, etc. Although this would be done more in theory than in practice, we've aimed to address the line distribution and music video screen time, etc. concerns of fans through just giving everyone relatively equal allocation. It's that simple. Within reason, of course. Obviously, the main vocals will have a few more lines than others, and obviously, the main dancers will have more dance center time. But it shouldn't be as drastic as it currently is now. Only Chaehyun would have significantly more screen time, but she is literally the center and kind of the main character of the storyline, so it makes sense. If you want to go really hard on being equal for everyone, one member can be the pseudo-main character for each music video, but I just don't think that's needed. Now, some of you, probably named Ever Glow Up or something similar, may say that even line distributions are BS. The mediocre filler member vocalist should not be getting the same number of lines as the technically skilled main vocalist. This would just be ridiculous, and it's rewarding them for their mediocrity. And while I do agree that line distributions should be based on who is best suited for a line and who has the skill to pull it off, as opposed to just some random person for a quota we need to fill, it's a bit different in this kind of situation. As I have said many times now, at the end of Girls Planet, Wake1 can see clearly that Kep1er have a very volatile fandom, and a volatile fandom will get us nowhere. The first step is appeasing the volatile fandom so they will become less volatile. From there, we can work more freely. And appeasing the fandom means even line distributions and even everything else. This comes hand in hand with my goal of using the members better. A better line distribution would appease fans of all members, especially those like Mashiro, Yujin, and Bahie who feel that their biases get no lines. Hence, they would be more likely to buy albums, and more albums equals more money for us, Wake1. We've also fulfilled my goal of using Kep1er more internationally, as in our timeline they never had a world tour or even an Asian tour. Hopefully a world tour would help increase their international popularity, or at the very least would bring in a shitload of cash for Wake1. Next, the album release dates and how they tend to clash with groups like IVE, who are incredibly successful and appeal to a similar audience to Kep1er. I've tried to avoid this by moving their album release dates as far apart from IVE, LE SSERAFIM and NewJeans as possible. This, no doubt, means that they will eventually have at least some overlap with a popular group like 17 or Idol, but I hope that this will allow Kep1er to get more music show wins in general. Now, you may say, Casper, Wake1 doesn't know when IVE are going to have a comeback and thus plan to avoid it. And yeah, they don't know for sure when IVE are having comebacks, but they can do two things: plan and be flexible. Basically, plan albums and have albums ready in advance, so they can be moved if possible and if needed. Second, Wake1 work with Mnet, and Mnet and Wake1 combined probably have a lot of knowledge about the industry and insider tips. They would probably be able to hear rumours of IVE having a comeback pretty far out from the actual release, hence they can plan around it more easily. They would also be able to plan in advance which songs would be the most liked and thus should be a better title track. This is just basic industry research. For instance, they can look at which songs the members perform better, they can look at what is currently trending in the industry, they can even get some fans in advance to vote on which title track would be a better option. Let's be honest, with a little bit of planning and industry research, they probably would have figured out that Mask would be far more popular than an outdated concept like Wadada. I also hope that the storyline and concept I have given them will 1. Help give them a group identity that makes them uniquely Kep1er, and 2. Help them get their name out there and thus get more music show wins, more album sales, more fans, and generally more popular and successful. I also hope that this will increase their production values, whether or not more money is actually put into the group. A lot of things I've mentioned, like light powers, the black hole, etc., would require CGI, and this would of course increase the budget of productions. But Wake1 have shown themselves able to put decent to good CGI in Kep1er's music videos and to spend money on them like in Wadada. Mostly. As far as reality shows, as I said earlier, I rarely hear of Kep1er on reality shows because they just don't get a lot of views and don't get a lot of buzz. I feel that sending pairs of members to more shows would have a greater impact on who knows the group, and I think they can use their reality personalities in-house. Bahie is the face of the group, and I think she has a good reality personality as well as being friends with many people in the industry. So, a reality show run by her would be great. Something along the lines of Eunchae's Star Diary or Yoonji's drinking show, minus the drinking. Wakwon have 3 options here. Let her go by herself and bring in tons and tons of views, as her fans relentlessly stream everything she releases, cycle through other members as co-hosts, or just straight up give her a permanent co-host. Youngin would be the best pick in my opinion. To separate her, or distance her rather, like conceptually from things like Eunchae's Star Diary, it would be good if it had a concept. Bahia likes cooking, so a cooking concept would be cute and also would probably suit her well, but it could be literally anything. At the end of the day, we can't see the future, and we don't know whether my alternate version of Kep1er would flop or be the next IZ one. I can't know if it would buy them more sales or more views or a less toxic fandom. I can't even say for certain if people would prefer it to the current Kep1er, because, well, in that universe they wouldn't know what we have here, so they wouldn't know to be grateful or to hate it or whatever else. But I do think that my rework has achieved all of its goals, and I like to think that this version would be more appreciated and would have allowed them to have a lasting artistic impact on the industry as well as a unique identity. There are lots of space concepts in K-pop, but most of the groups who have them aren't as popular as Kep1er, even after Kep1er went downhill at the end of their contracts. And I think that by focusing on Kep1er's charms and character development as opposed to just straight up superpowers, I've given them something unique. Most of all, their story is relatively simple and coherent, nicely following the hero's journey arc, which means that all types of fans will be able to appreciate it, and that everything will be wrapped up nicely at the end of their careers. Hopefully this uniqueness will give them the edge they need. I've looked at artistic, technical, and industry-specific marketing tactics and have tried to use them, which should also help. I'm obviously not a professional, but I think it would work, especially if time, love, and care was put into it by Wakwon. And let's be honest, everyone loves a pretty girl in a space crown, and everyone loves cute aliens. So, having established exactly why and how I think my rework of Kep1er would work, and why I think it's better than what they have now, let's take a fun little moment to look at another concern some of you might have. Casper, if Wakwon plans this whole story and all of the music videos and everything else in advance, it sounds awfully tailored to the current members of Kep1er, doesn't it? What would they do if they had different members in the final lineup? Well, believe it or not, I did consider that too. Before Kep1er's lineup is decided, Wakwon should have the following ready to go. A detailed timeline of Kep1er's 2.5-year storyline, and the materials like mama stages and a quota of music videos needed to achieve that. Rough story ideas and storyboards for each of the needed music videos. The albums planned in advance. Based on K-pop, they would probably have all of the title song demos well in advance, probably before debut, but they would have the songs for the first year since debut finalized and waiting for members, and everything onwards would be a work in progress. I genuinely don't think this is too much to ask for. Like, this is literally just any basic creative planning in advance. It's like working on a film or something. Obviously, K-pop is not film, but again, it's just basic planning for a concept. Like, Luna would have had well over double of this planned in advance. So, Wakwon has a plan for a story, but they don't know which members they'll get, and thus which powers would be suitable, which charms would stand out, etc. So what do they do if they don't get our literal current version of Kep1er's lineup? Well, they should probably have a list of potential charms and powers that the final 18 of the show have, and then just allocate as needed, with spares for the centre of the group and the centres of each country. To demonstrate how this could still be done with a very different lineup, let me show you how I would do it with what, if you watched my Girls Planet videos, you would know ended up being my final ideal lineup from Girls Planet. Ziyin, Wonjae, Mashiro, Youngin, Shana, Yaning, Bora, Yujin, and Suyeon. There's only very few powers that are actually essential to our storyline, and they can easily be allocated to other members. In this lineup, Zian would be the overall group center and the Chinese center. I would probably make Mashiro the Japanese center, although Shana would have been fine too, and Youngin would be the Korean center. In this group, we still have our two co-leaders, Yujin and Mashiro. Fun fact. Let's start from the top. Zian is the center, and since our center is kind of our main dancer and she's stunning, I think that Chaehyun's cosmic radiance would suit her too. Her other charm would be beauty, and her two powers, future sight and colouring the world like Chaehyun, with her affinities to the sun, the moon and the aurora. I didn't pick the same as Chaehyun because I think they're similar people. I just think the power of future sight and colour going to the centre of the group is key. I actually think Zian would do better with an affinity to the moon than the sun, but I do think the centre should be allocated affinity with the sun automatically since they're the centre of the group. Hence, I replaced Chaehyun's affinity with space dust with an affinity with the moon. Wonse is known for her great variety attitude and bringing joy. She literally has Girls Planet memes that circulate to this day. Hence, I think she would be a good person to have the charm of joy and the power of preserving memories like Bahie. Her affinity would be with the sun. Mashiro stays as is, the charm of elegance, the power of ley magic, and the affinity with the moon. As the Japanese center, I'll allocate her the secondary charm of connection, and the power of telepathy and affinity with the stars, influenced by her role as a co-leader. Youngin would stay as is, the charm of shining on stage, the power to control light, and affinity with the stars. As the Korean center, her secondary charm will be duality with the power to shapeshift, and an affinity with the moon, which also shifts in shape. Shana's charm would be sincerity, something which I think her face exudes a lot of, and which she showed on Girls Planet. Since I have matched the charm of sincerity with a desire to be close to fans, and thus with teleportation in Yeso, I will do the same here. Shana's power will be teleportation, and this time her affinity will be with meteors, which also sincerely burn up while trying to get closer to the Earth. Oh my goodness, the logic of K-pop has broken me. Yunning's charm will be her coolness, an important thing for K-pop idols to have, or at least on occasion. Her power will be controlling ice, as this would suggest. Her affinity will be with the stars. Bora will be the face of the group, and thus will have an affinity with the aurora, the same as Zian, the center. I think Bora's sincerity, charm, and leadership skills would make her a great face of the group, and she would be able to show off the vocal skill this lineup would have. Bora's charm will be that of hope. She always has hope for the future for her group and takes everything optimistically. Her power will be control over technology and the radar station, since in the story her hope will manifest in sending a message into space for the rest of the group. She'll be helping Mashiro and Wonse develop weapons against the black hole. Yujin will also stay as is, the charm of empathy and the power of emotion manipulation and transference. Her affinity is still with the moon. Finally, Sooyeon's charm will be her passion on stage. I'll give her the power of electricity manipulation, which also ends up being important in the final battle, and the affinity with meteors, as Daeon also had. Also, Sooyeon was a close runner-up for Korean center in this version. I had trouble picking between her and Youngin, but in the end I think Youngin has shown more ability to adapt, while Sooyeon just has raw aptitude and stage presence. So this lineup has the following affinities: the aurora for Bora and Zian, the sun for Zian and Wonse, the moon for Mashiro, Zian, Youngin and Yujin, the stars for Mashiro, Youngin and Yanning, and meteors for Sooyeon and Shana. You'll also notice that unless you have seriously different perceptions of these trainees to me, these charms and powers all make sense, and that all of the powers that have an active part in driving our storyline, future sight, telepathy, control over technology, teleportation, creating light, storing memories, and electricity, all exist in this group. They would be very easy to allocate. So yeah, just for the fun of it, I'll allocate these guys' positions as well. Our co-leaders will be Mashiro and Yujin. I thought about changing Yujin out for Bora, but I don't think Wakwon would ever do that, so we'll just leave it like that. Our main vocalists will be almost the entire group. Ziyin, Shana, and Bora, with Wonje and Youngin possibly making it in. Everyone else is a regular vocalist. Our main dancers will be Youngin and Suyeon, with everyone else in regular dance positions. And our main rappers will be Youngin, Yanning, and Suyeon, with Mashiro, Wonze, and Bora as sub-rappers, since they have rapped in the past and thus could be used as backups or to harmonize. This group also has the ability to pull off all of the concepts I outlined in Kep1er's alternate career. In fact, I think duality and the ability to adapt are a big charm of this group in general, so I have very few concerns for them. Actually, the storyline I gave alternate Kep1er is one that cycles through a lot of emotions and moods, and thus should give every member a chance to shine. If Wakwon is concerned that this group is too vocal heavy and not dance heavy enough, well, just change some of their promoted B-sides to not have a choreography, or promote ballads more. They could become the next vocal powerhouse girl group in the industry. With enough planning, any potential lineup Wakwon ended up having could be turned into an amazing art project. The fact that they didn't put in effort, likely because they didn't get their ideal lineup, or the thought that they probably wouldn't have put much effort in either way, is horrifying. The trainees of Girls Planet and the members of Kep1er deserve much better than to just be an experiment. Kep1er was a 9-member project girl group formed through the survival show Girls Planet 999. The show was an attempt to reintroduce Mnet's survival show series produce after a rigging scandal prematurely cancelled it after the 4th season, and thus, both the show Girls Planet and the group Kep1er who came out of it were poorly run and treated, and were generally treated as an experiment. This meant that the 9 talented members of Kep1er were used as a cash cow while their toxic fandom and, most importantly, trashy management sunk them into relative obscurity in the industry. Their career is full of missed opportunities and regrets from fans and antis alike. I strongly believe that the single largest cause leading to Kep1er's inability to reach their full potential and their eventual failure as a group was the poor management of the group by Wakwon, and I have demonstrated in the bulk of this video exactly how better management could have led to better outcomes for the group, even with the current controversial lineup and volatile fandom. In this episode, I have discussed how poor management choices, their divided fandom, and other factors have led to a steep downwards trend in Kep1er's album sales and statistics pre-renewal, and have discussed how they were given the vaguest of beginnings to a storyline, but nothing further, creating a lack of group identity and generally letting down the few fans who noticed said story. I then discussed all of the issues fans have with the group and their management, and discussed how I would fix them. The bulk of the video and the bulk of my solution to fan problems was to give them a solid storyline. Influenced by their space concept, the idea of each girl having different charms, and the hero's journey, while bringing in their original storyline. I've also shown how this storyline could be planned in advance and executed with a variety of different trainees, so that in the end, Kep1er could have a complete arc as a group, could give each of the members the best shot possible at succeeding in the industry post-disbandment, and could hopefully have left a lasting artistic mark on the industry. At the end of it all, I'm mostly just left feeling sad. The group and the members had so much potential which was squandered by the company, and in the end, the members, in my opinion, have kind of wasted their time in the group, and the group failed to fulfill its purpose of advertising them well. The fact that 7 out of 9 of them renewed suggests that the companies of each of the members just felt they'd be better off getting a tiny portion of the group's profits than actually taking the members back. This episode has made me thoroughly depressed, but at least if I ever actually get to move towards directing K-pop music videos, it could serve as a portfolio of sorts. But even that is wistful thinking. On that sad note, let's cheer up a little bit. The members of Kep1er are still alive and kicking, even if they're not fully together anymore, and although hate will follow many of the members wherever they go, I hope that they all have successful futures in the industry, or wherever they want to go next. So I hope that you, Solar, will join me in optimistically following and supporting all 9 members in the future. Actually, after I wrote this video, I ended up writing a short film script vaguely inspired by the storyline I wrote for Kep1er. I've linked the film we ended up making in the description for those who are interested. Since, as a student filmmaker, I don't have access to a big budget or CGI, the story has to change a bunch, but it still retains similar themes and visual ideas. I hope you enjoy it. But that concludes today's episode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time.